Not to blame others. I think that's very important. That was one of the triggering awareness moments, Satori. Brothers and sisters, please forgive any offense now that I know that blame is a clear indication of a kilesa, and so if it happens, stop yourself right away and reflect. And depersonalize on that issue. It could take years, but if you're really effective, it could take an instant. Some people it takes 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Some people have it down to 2. But those 2 are just as difficult as yours. Okay? Not more. Probably not more. Your case, your special case, your personalized case, it's much more, you think. That's why it's there still, with its attachment to you. But the wonderful thing about awareness is once you become aware of it, you can drop it, which is to say you progress as a person by becoming more cultivated, more noble, more refined, more subtle, less caring about blame and insults, and much more caring about compassion. Compassion always delivers. See, somebody was like, well, my grandmother who was compassionate, she sent me a care package in winter and it arrived. And that was very compassionate. Some of those pieces of equipment are still in use today. How much time do you got if you've only got 2 minutes to live, one after the other? On and on and on like that. Why can't you break it up into segments? You can break up numbers into decimals, go to 1,000th, and then add a 10. And that's where you start getting into precision and accuracy and the realness of what is really there and not what you thought was there or could have guessed was there, because it's impossible. But to the 1,000th and the 10th really does matter a lot for things to work versus things not working. So God bless all of the scientists, all of the humanitarians, all of the humanists, so that we don't lose them in any kind of conflagration, that they are very valuable people and should not be distorted in any way. And there should be, let's say, rigorous debate, but fair debate about their ideas in the context of their times, so that we do not get too married to any one position that might be socially detrimental in any way. Why would we endanger our health? Why would we endanger our societies with programs that don't work or cause problems versus solving them? Hey, all you people out there riding the subway, I ride the subway too. I want it to work perfectly. Can you help me do that by allowing me to do that? By agreeing to the principle that it can be done. Are you with me or not? If so, let's make it happen and not be doomerized or persuaded by nonsense of people that can just be bought out because they have no principles. They have no performance. So how much do they need to go away? Can there be a settlement reached? Maybe they want too much. Maybe you just have to give them a deal and have them walk away on some level, because their assets have depreciated, because they're not the same place that the place was even 10 years ago because of bad management. But that could have been to diverse reasons that might have been geopolitical, as crazy as that sounds. something far off imported to one's shores with no upside kind of scenario. That can happen at any time, anywhere, under any conditions, with anyone, essentially, if you depersonalize it and look at it as a scientific principle. But who would be against things like that and for things like that, and why? Well, why is it getting unnecessarily complicated at a point where it should be simplified? Who would be against something like that, and why should one listen to them? Wrong in small things, wrong in big things. Wrong in big things, wrong in small things. Sort of connected like that. The causality, the karma of that. See, it's a religious principle. It has nothing to do with blame or accusations. I think that's very important. No blame to any individual. It's about kalesas, mind poisons, and the developing kind of economic or decision-making structure that can grow up around that, or also not. That there are civilized ways of reconstructing things versus uncivilized ways. So the civilized parties are the ones that are required, not the barbarians. Now, civilized parties are not interested in domination and control and manipulation, but rather what is a wise policy, and be damned what cometh of it if it gets the job done in a civilized way. Even with very different people that one might not have thought could have cooperated with each other. But lo and behold, human beings are more civilized than chimpanzees most of the time. And so they act with religious principles, or principles that have been made religious, because they have a good net social cohesive effect in the realization of high moral standards and ethical conduct, and no violence. Non-violent societies where that's not considered normal, they're better. That's why. How do we get there? Well, having realistic conversations psychologically or psychosocially, so that one's environment is conducive to one's well-being, and vice versa. Now, you wouldn't believe this as a normal person probably, but at the tippy top of the ivory tower when I said that, it was as if a punch bowl, a crystal punch bowl filled with Kool-Aid, smashed on the marble terrace by the swimming pool and broke into trillions of fragments. That might be what snobbery looks like. That you cannot accept better ideas. That's absurd, isn't it? So look at the luxury of that metaphor. And don't be that type of person that is so shocked that the bowl is already broken. Kind of viewpoints from a Taoist perspective can get one to unexpectedly simplified results as far as what is conducive for good behavior versus what is not. And how we can live in civilized societies together, benefiting in a net positive way, rather than getting into disputes that cause so much aggravation. One cannot even sleep at night because one has created such ill will in the world. So how do we calm down from that? It should be a science as well as an art, and really is both, and needs to be both to be effective. So please, brothers and sisters, let us walk away from any kind of petty conflicts. Any kind of petty conflicts, especially when they're petty, and they're all petty. How much money did you make? You wanted to make 10 million, you only made 5? Come on, get real. 100 million instead of $1 billion, You've taken it too far. You're just seeing numbers. You're not seeing the net impact of policy, which is either generous and beneficial and enlightened or not. It's austere, it's perverse, it's debilitating, it's saddening, it's sickening. So yeah, who would want that for the best people on earth? Some of them anyway. Look, 1 million people on this planet are worth preserving. Do you want to just talk to a tree in the woods? You want to listen to the wind? You can do that. Just pretend everyone else in the world is gone. Is that a great world? Or just remember the 1 million Kalyana Mitta out there that are so insightful that they're really the reason why the Holy Noble Path is so illustrious and valuable. Indeed. Is it not so, brothers and sisters? Who would have told you that if somebody didn't tell you that? Yourself, you think? Are you that far gone? That's narcissism. That's the end of the road. That's what you should not be. You need not be encapsulated in a self. It's called no self. It's been known for 2,500 years. People fade it all the time, every day, every minute. It's a natural human state, just like sucking your thumb or something, right? Some people get into the habit, they stick in the habit of that. Essentially, psychologically, that's sort of what they're doing. Is that all that awful? Well, not really, until it takes on some type of grotesque expression if you let it and you don't realize that that's the reason why it keeps happening to you. Because that's sort of bad karma, it's samsaric, and it's sort of normal and common, much more normal and common than you would think, especially in more pampered societies, which we have become, which is not de facto a bad thing. It's just, it allows for a bunch of unskillfulness to proliferate because things are too comfortable that people don't want to listen to people who might have different ideas other than just being comfortable with no strategic depth or meaning to it. In fact, perhaps even counterintuitively not that. So why can't one reconsider one's options based on that, which might not have been something one would have expected, and yet why should we have expectations of anything other than the most basic things? It's a miracle when people are compassionate and capable and professional and good. It's a miracle. But it's a miracle that happens a lot more than people might think that get too down on certain things for whatever reason. Perhaps just having a critical mind, right? Aversion, not liking. Getting into not liking. What are you getting into again? What type of relationship is that? It's ridiculous. That's masochism on some level. So you can have masochistic social conventions, and then you can have people that don't tolerate that. Right? They don't go along with that. They don't find that enthralling. And even bullies and whatever don't pull it off to pull the other trick. Right? Push and pull. There's like different kinds of games apparently for engagement. But who would enter into something like that? What for? Can you beat yourself up? Can't you criticize yourself? Anyone can criticize themselves a lot better than these fools out there. Hey, my comedy routine. What are you talking about? I think that's the problem. They come up to someone to the level of a poet and they try to define the poet into some kind of rap bag and beat it. But that don't fit. It's like trying to put lightning in a can. They can't do it, and so they get zapped, they get electrocuted, and don't know what to do, and then they just do the same thing or get worse, become meaner, more accusatory. For what? Because they diminish what you do. You're not doing anything. For what reason again? What do they think is important? I wrote 5 books last year that will never go out of print. But during that time, they thought, the roof needed redone, even though it was working for years and would be working for years. But they seemed to know it better because they wanted a different color or something. And thought that was more important. Hey, look, these things can happen. What are your variables? These variables out there, let me come back to my comedy routine, they are hilarious. Look, you think your variables are bad? Look at someone like, Ben Affleck or whoever else, some other comedian. Their lives, was their inspiration of all their bad jokes. But they're good ones too. Come on, just the way they could look at things in a kind of zany way to convey the message that they were totally crazy for a long time. And so, but they funneled it into comedy, not into destroying people's lives, not being destroyed themselves. Hopefully not. Hopefully they weren't in it just for making other people laugh, that they were in it to make themselves laugh, and did, and do. That they're laughing out loud at life. And have been since the first my moment. And also will be into the Bardos. Comedy people, I just want to keep bringing you back to the point that in order for the comedian to understand buffoonery, one must sort of be one and see oneself as that and be allowed to be that to make yourself laugh at the end of the day. But if we enter into some kind of monotone world where there's these normed personalities and nothing can be expressed, then we've entered into a very poor kind of drafty place that has nothing essentially but bricks and not people that live and feel and think and make mistakes and get jammed up about this or that thing, that they can unjam themselves and laugh and laugh and laugh and laugh and laugh about their foolish mistakes. And that they don't go too far, right? Where it's not funny, where they can't recover from that. Or maybe they can. That's the movie I want to watch. That's the movie I star in. I am the star. The shining star at this time of pure comedy. But nobody's laughing except me. Well, again, coming back to the ivory tower people, totally offended and boycotted by those types of sentiments. Look, it's arts and sciences, right? Arts and sciences. You can't science-fy the arts into some kind of conformity program that is flipped on top of that without having detrimental cultural downstream effects, social effects, and this is what they're supposed to look like. And I'm somehow the bad guy. And there's not enough space in a town that's full of vacant properties to come up with some new ideas that might be a little zany, like using a hydraulic press on tobacco leaves, kind of changing zany behavior that this kind of place always did tolerate up until, 6 months ago? And why would that be? For the benefit of the citizens here, of the world, of the universe. Who would think that way if they could think differently? If they knew how big the arts are. You got people in Italy, Croatia, Ukraine, you name it, they're not going anywhere. You're talking about an audience never before seen. But here, the local situation overclouds and overshadows all that because of what again? What would be the reason that something like that should be in one's own vicinity for? What again? Where again? Who again? Well, such trifling matters could be anywhere, couldn't they? Or not. Like that pure, clean, crisp air in, let's just say, shall I say, southern Pennsylvania, for example. Or maybe Virginia, or North Carolina, or Maine, or New Hampshire, or there's so many beautiful states in this lovely country. So why can't we have lovely lives without any contention? What if OSHA is required to come down from these crazy kinds of campaigns? To wreck people's moods, their businesses, whatever, the way they think. Let's walk away from that. Let's not go back there. I think that would make the most sense for the most people, even if they're not willing to accept that right now. That maybe tomorrow they'll reconsider that position, and then everyone will benefit, including apparently their own kind of captive audiences. They're just dying to be so finely entertained by such glamorously innovative ideas that make so much sense. They're so convincing that why would one stand in the way of that? Deaf, dumb, and blind, the three brothers. There's so many parables and stories. We can learn so much from them, so many myths. I do not regret gaining knowledge in those things. And I wish you all would return to Aesop's fables, in Ionian, as the Indians called them. And just that magical insight of all of those tales, that we can return to them and illustrate them again, and relive them again, renew them again, so that we discern that insight, that wisdom, that they be like seeds that we cultivate in our minds, that lead us to the clear path of clear practice. And not into the brambles. But if we get caught in the brambles, that we compassionately lead ourselves back out of the brambles with that redemptive module. Vicarious joy, that's what I'm going to call mudita. They said sympathetic joy. You see, a translator comes to the rescue. Vicarious joy. Joy via the vicarious root. That's mudita. Every time you hear mudita, think of that. Vicarious. Yeah, look. At least for people who like English, that word is so much better. Just admit it. Vicariousness. Find some happy moments if you have to jumpstart your carburetor from zero, if it's a cold morning. Look at that little dog picture where that dog's laughing at you with that face. It'll snap you out of it. It's like taking a sniff tobacco, right? It's a little thing that can go a long way, especially in bad times. There's beads, one bead after the other. Repeat good thoughts. There's bowing. There's yoga. Right? There's one meal a day kind of living. And then there's a lot of contemplation and a lot of hygiene, and then a lot of purity and a lot of heavenly abodes, such as just being free from aggravation. Just those little aggravations that have grown over time and have grown onto you like barnacles, that they're all gone during those times. Because you've meticulously defused them, detached them, faded them, decrystallized them, washed them, burnt them, burned them. Every little playful experiment you could to shrink them to nothing, down to finally zero, and then the roots too. And then repaving an area and redesigning it completely, and then maybe even reinventing it in 3D or 4D or 5D space without any hindrance at all, because they're all gone. Poof. That one unleashes a black hole equivalent for dukkha in your universe of your mind, and it will be working in the background without you even realizing it after you've conceptualized it. Just getting rid of all of that residual nonsense that has you hunched over, because on some subconscious level it is still bothering you. Yes, it is. Just admit it. You're not going to get past it with denial. You plaster over it. It's still inside. You did not remove it. You did not address it. You're a bad contractor. That wall is flimsy. Look, I could put a finger in it, and all of a sudden expletives pop out. A lot of bad language. It has a lot of bad causality is caused by that, which is very unskillful. One can make enemies instead of friends, just with a few cross words. Someone you don't know understands you poorly, and you're not able to communicate your way out of it or explain it away or make it plausible, then maybe, that incident could have negative implication. And so one should be wary of what words one says or does not say. In fact, not saying anything is usually the best policy, at least for a long time, until one knows what is about one in a receptive way and not in some kind of abrasive way, which is not necessarily the way one wants to be understood, or one in which one wants to interact with someone or another, and yet no one is forced to do anything. That's part of the charm of having places, multiple places that one can either get in trouble in or not, or get out of trouble in eventually, to reflect on one's own behavior and to make improvements based on the kinds of experiments, playful experiments that one might have made, even socially, but not, of course, making gigantic faux pas, because, and then again, even if you did, it's some place that isn't all that important anyway, and there's other places where one can be completely reformed in and not make those mistakes of the past. Not that that has anything to do with my biography or life at all. It's just a story, a literary device to get you thinking in that direction. And then think of all those literary devices, all those books, depersonalize your persona that has kept you attached to this or that wrong view, right? It's usually wrong view. Your effort is all right. It's just you're doing the wrong thing with wrong view. Change your view, everything changes, as they say. It's so true. You can't unsee something you've seen, and if you've seen through aggravation, you're going to get rid of it every time, no matter how it presents itself. And it's always a charlatan. Always comes in with a lot of importance and fluster. But 3 days later, you've already forgotten it. Usually. 3 hours, 30 minutes, 5 minutes. Depends on how good you are. But no, it's important. It's not important. Chances are, it's like a 99.99999%, it's not important. So allow yourself to evolve, allow yourself to make mistakes, allow yourself to recover from mistakes and not get too hung up on this or that thing or being liked by a lot of other people, when in fact the real key is just not being disliked. See my comedy routine. Just don't be disliked. Do not wear offensive clothing, right? Do not look messed up. Look your best. I think that's what our grandparents and great-grandparents would want for us. I don't see anything wrong with that. I see a lot right with that. And we should have spaces where we can meet and do great things, including the workplace, but also socially, because what are you working for if the social context is totally trash for nefarious reason? So if that is your place, then you're going to have to dig yourself out a shovel at a time. But if it isn't, then enjoy that place, at least where you are, because look, there's changing forms and conditions all the time. There are places out there today that were so fantastically cool, even just 5 years ago, that are just bombed out and wasted today. Through no fault of their own, mind you. Just wrong place, wrong time kind of dynamic. And maybe they didn't know the right people, right? The wrong people came in, and then you got the causality from that. So I am not invested in any of those narratives. Like, I don't know any names. I don't point any fingers. I'm on a literary level. Like, as a photographer, you're not just going to be taking photos of flowers, most likely. If you're going to cover life, like a literary person does, you're going to have to take some strolls through life in all of its facets to have any kind of depth or connection with your audience at scale, because that is how you connect with other people, by knowing how people live, how people feel so passionately about the arts, that that is the meaning of their life. They feel. Everything else is just ancillary to that. Is that so wrong? Can't we have different people? Who? Let's see a raised hands. Who wants more people like that versus a bunch of masochistic bullies and flipped ideological people? Let's see a sea of hands. Nobody for the other crew? Okay. Huh. So surprising, isn't it? But see, the good doesn't always win out for political reasons, right? Economic reasons and a lot of other reasons. But a lot of times it just is a lack of inspiration, a lack of courage, a lack of doing what you can with what you have, because that's what you do, because you're so amazingly pragmatically, compassionately alive in this dimension as a mensch. But back to the comedy routine. So the whole crowd's going to boo a mensch that just shows up in the middle of the night, doesn't realize it's a comedy routine, and so just walks straight up to the stage because their whole life is just one big comedy after a while. Starts talking. Hey, buddy, there was no comedy club here. This guy's talking to himself. No, this is just my practice. I try out jokes, and if they're not funny, then at least I laugh at them later, if I can, even if I've been booed out of more places than I can recall. To the point where I would even walk into a cave with a strange little thing that one could listen to oneself and then refine that process into something like the Diamond James vehicle or some such crazy nonsense like that. But wait a second, you didn't pay admission and I didn't collect any fees, and I don't need to be bothering anyone anyway with some kind of performance. But it was very nice meeting you, or not meeting you in this case. But in any case, look at all the books in a library and how many people have had those kinds of realms or bardos versus people that don't know of them because they are illiterate. Or the equivalent of that as far as high and noble tastes and appreciations go. No, but someone would say, "Oh, that's not funny. That's scary." Well, it would be if that really was a compulsion, right? To go into groups of people and force them to laugh at your comedy. It's inappropriate, right? So you can playfully experiment in different ways. In that you don't have to do that, and you can still appreciate their company and not impose on theirs, and be an observer. A listener, a good listener. That is really good advice. But don't feel the need to say something immediately, if at all. That's a very congenial attitude to have, instead of someone that need dominate one interaction or another. And yet, one should probably be introduced to the people who are proper enough, vetted enough to appreciate the high arts of good conversation versus some kind of demand or want or requirement or necessity or something like that. And so one need not take offense at others or be offended oneself, or take the offenses one has of oneself all that seriously, especially when they are not as serious as they may pretend to be. Well, if you've listened to this lecture, you certainly hear me say that it does make sense to reflect on the life of the Buddha, and not just maybe take one version, but take a bunch of versions and come to a synthesis about it, imbue it with some meaning, break it down for you so that you can understand his life better. That's what the practitioners say is a good thing to do. But do that with a bunch of other people, but not all people, because you might fall into trying to understand them and being too conceited. But someone like Edgar Allan Poe, I think, is a worthwhile figure to reflect on how he lived, his times, his trials and tribulations, and finally, how things went for him in business and personally, and in many ways was a reflection of unskillfulness, yes. And yet, despite all of that, still managed to be talented in his own way, which was not appreciated by the vast amount of people he interacted with, especially his contemporaries, who were highly disdainful and dismissive and, shall we say, haughty concerning how he managed to survive under those brutish and brutal conditions at that time, especially his personal life, like losing his mother and things like that, and being in a military school, that really do flesh out his background a little bit a little bit more to give one perhaps some more insight into some of perhaps his drearier moments, but also how he was able to skillfully navigate through those so that it remained an entertaining story. It did not become a personalized thing. That one could extract the panya or wisdom from the tale with some samadhi. But again, these things, some of them are very dark and some of them are also misleading. I think this is why, for example, Romanticism took off, because literary people have more of an influence on people, and they had a negative influence in that they imbued, shall we say, misleading narratives, or normalizing some kind of dissatisfaction with certain things rather than being grateful for the good things that certainly did exist in their time. A lot of people today wish they had the terrible things they had, so-called, today, because by comparison they really weren't all that bad. But people made them worse because of the kilesas and the three realms. But we know about that now because we've reconnected to our Eastern ancestry and cultural heritage, as if there was just a bump in the road and now we don't see a problem with, for example, the life of the Buddha, or people like Edgar Allan Poe, and having a little bit more understanding for them, but also seeing their fallibility in, for example, suffering unnecessarily. That's, I think, a couple of poems he has where that suffering comes across so distinctly, so realistically, that it's almost as if one's suffering oneself, or can see one's own suffering in his own suffering, which makes it one of those things which helps build rapport with one's audience, but also helps guide them through it in the form of a third person or a story, and everyone knows it's a story and it doesn't matter, and things of that nature. It's a wonderful literary device that one could use in accordance with good practicing principles that leads the audience to better outcomes, that happy end, right? That happy mind moment, that ever-evolving, dynamic, uplifting, purifying, burning, enthusiastic, charismatic kind of here now, instead of in the doldrums somewhere or wanting something you cannot have. Because old age, sickness, and death can take those things from us. They took them from Edgar Allan Poe. And not just one time. So don't get into the bad habit of melancholy. But see them, see how their lives are instructive. Just, did you almost drown in a pool of water? Well, the Buddha did. He's not that smart, or wasn't. So you're smarter than him, you think, at least up until that point. But then he got smart, he got wise, and you didn't. Because being comfortable isn't an accomplishment. But getting through or past discomfort is. especially if those things may have been immense to the point that they were determining one's life in a negatively causal way. For understandable reasons, rationalizing reasons, but the practice breaks all of that up and dismisses it and disposes of it again and again and again and again and again, like a diamond tip hammer, drill, jackhammer, if it has to be, to get through any solidified kilesas, if that's what it takes. But it does take time in some cases. Sometimes it goes real quick. It's like just one moment of satori, and just by changing their point of view, that 1 degree, everything snaps off of them in the form of dukkha. Now they might be standing there dusty, but that's a very invigorating feeling of liberation. And if it just happens one time for 1 second, you know it's possible. Which is not to say you will heedlessly only desire that realization, but you will just very wholesomely be assured that no matter what, it need not cling to you. But we do understand that these things have very strong locking power, like a pit bull's jaws at some times. That we want to let it go, but it doesn't let us go kind of scenario. But that is not to say that the theory and the practice cannot be brought into unison, and that one can playfully experiment with whatever it is one is personally dealing with in a depersonalization process. That could be one of the back doors to these kinds of things. That can, for example, you remove the bolts of the joints and the thing falls apart, you can then move your hand out, kind of counterintuitive strategy rather than a direct frontal assault. And you diffuse these things rather than rip them out. Like a robot, you pull the plug on it, all of its mechanical powers, you don't have to fight. You're not going 1-to-1 against the hydraulics. You just found the plug and you pulled that. Very little effort, but it took searching in the dark for it. It took analyzing blueprints for it. It took going and then finding that wasn't the place, but then not giving up and going to a different place, and so on and so forth. Because the theory was correct. Without the power, powering the robot does nothing. The robot is invincible, right? From the standpoint of human strength, the comparison. But that power cord is not. That is the finesse of skillfulness versus brute force, which is what most people do in a common, normal, unskillful way, which is why they lose these fights against these things that are so very, very, very real at times for so very, 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 very many people. In fact, every one of us, at least at one point in our lives, in many cases, it's a daily ritual. It's an hourly competition. And we just keep knocking them out. Because that's where this practice was born. Worldly tip is that if you're on the 24-hour cycle, then you get to see that certain people live in certain patterns like certain animals, but maybe it need not be that way. If it need not be that way, if there's a real reason for living on the edge of the planet, such as in Antarctica, where it is dark most of the time, that still does not mean that this planet is a bad place, and quite the contrary. You have very cozy focal points where people come together and are very happy to see another living human being that is living in such a just awfully harsh environment that would just kill you instantly. If you're left out in the cold, no love at all, no compassion, no warmth. Who wants to die of frostbite like that? Ouch. And so one is so happy to see one of noble heart and mind, someone who has cleaned themselves up from whatever they've been involved with and committed themselves to the noble path. Such as a mountaineer that's fallen down so many mountains that one thinks that one broke more boulders than bones. From 15,000 feet all the way down multiple times. But that just in a metaphoric sense, that doesn't count. For a materialist, it's invisible. It's not real, he says, she says. But it was so much bigger than that, so much more expansive than that. The total universality of the universe. Nothingness in the palm of one's hand. In the palm of one's mind. For hygienic purposes, compassionate purposes, clever, creative purposes, just dashingly glamorous purposes, insightful, attractive, but not too attractive. Worthiness en passant, because one has cultivated worthiness and polishes it. And if one loses it, one finds it. If one lost it, one gets it back. Other things one does not get back. One loses those things. But that jade vehicle, one has that in mind. It transports one this way, that way, but only in the finest of elegant of places that are not material. They are spiritual. That's why it's so clean. That perfume is so pure. How could it not be the purest of the pure, the finest of the fine, the most mysterious of all mysteries? Pure beauty itself. And yet there are people who hate that concept because they don't know that concept. They don't experience that concept. They don't feel it so deeply that it just never lets them go. Ever. So the last breath is holding on. Never fading, only getting brighter, because that's the bardos that you're heading to, you're already in. As you accelerate all the wonderful fruits of the Spirit and none of the bad. So someone asked, why did you get out of the habit of asking others permission to do something you found insightful? Thanks. Yeah, it was difficult. It sounds ridiculous to admit that fact, but sometimes one gets caught up in these perspectional kinds of things, but look, one is not ready for these things at all times. If one can get even one small drop of pure awareness, you can consider it an accomplishment of a lifetime that might just be pivotal. in the way you experience this dimension and extract so much wisdom and compassion that you cannot help but be transformed, because that is the noble path. People say, well, you shouldn't think of it in terms of paths because it becomes too physical and not metaphysical enough. I see that point, but the other metaphor is there as well. You attain highest of high places, most pure of pure places, most magical of all places, most enchanting of all places, instead of the hell realms. All that is not made up, it's true. So how valuable is that again? Like, try to count up how valuable that is. Is it for sale, or do you have to cultivate it yourself? You see how it requires a shift in one's thinking to achieve? Do that. Just try it out. It's not compulsory. You don't have to stick with it if it's not working for you. Absolutely not. That's not the practice. The musician is not trying not to make music. And that's the whole point of tuning the instrument. It's not just for the sake of tuning an instrument and not playing it. That glorious sound, right? Like Handel's trumpet concerto. For all living, waking my moments into infinity, kind of rapturous comparison that one shouldn't think in sensory terms, because that would be misleading into the wrong direction. And yet these metaphors are just meant to motivate one to work through whatever hindrances are keeping them down, so that they can become so resilient at some later date perhaps, but maybe just in 3 mind moments, again and again and again, that they can redeem themselves no matter what in this dimension and any and all dimensions to come. The power of that, the transformative power of that. For people at all different stages of their life, but let's just take the worst stages if that's what's permissible, but you can already prepare for them in advance with these resilient methods that specifically are not dogmatic, however, are not misguided. Just some basic, simple stuff like 5 precepts, that's plug and play. No dispute there. No need for a lot of sophistry either. That's rather counterintuitive. Normative flipping games that don't, that's not the way, is it? Even if you could do that, why would you do that? Unless there's some ill intent or just pure stupidity or ignorance. Look, there's the hindrance. No pointing fingers. No naming names. Who should? It could have just been some kind of big delusion. Like, we go through delusional periods. I said this before, individually and socially. There's been periods of time, everyone needs to admit, that there were just terrible style trends. They looked ridiculous, stupid. They did not survive the test of time. They looked terrible because they were terrible. But other ones, not so much. They still resound. They still look fantastic. They still are fantastic. So what would I wish for you? Would it be the false thing or the genuine one? Do you think, as a compassionate being? Just take a guess. You have a dartboard, like there's one and the other, and you could even blindly throw it. You'll probably hit the right one at this point. At this point, if you're still hindered Who's going to do that work for you? Who's going to change your mind? How much more could be said and done to convince you about that you can't just make that basic choice automatically? How off base is your connectozoink or instincts? So people can get caught up in little dramas and narratives, and they can really get on the wrong path from a perfectionist viewpoint. And that's really awful karma for them and anyone that would believe them, sort of the Devidana model. He thought he knew it better and caused drama and division and ill will. And thank God, the Buddha survived that, at least the last one we know about. Thank God. He taught decades after that. But that Devidana character, something happened to him. Nobody talked about him for years and years and years and years. Sort of a dark chapter that only few people knew. So there's all different types of people in this realm and all different types of perspectives, and a lot of them, especially when you're dealing with supernaturally deceptive elements, then you can get into really wrong assessments about yourself and others. And there's bad causality connected to that, but correcting your view via right view, the causality of that as a counterpoint is heavenly, divinely, absolutely real. So we tend to over-focus on bad karma, but good karma, it's real. It's very practical. It's very visceral. Very visceral, life-affirming kind of principle. Also very instructional. And very disastrous to get wrong, even in small nuances. Very disastrous. Because one can think that what one is doing to get good karma is in fact doing the opposite of that. That's the danger of delusion. And so we must be very careful in these matters and really do the work to establish cause and effect in the mind, or at least see it or acknowledge that principle in all of its grandeur and all of its fine details and reverse equations like trigonometry or something. There's 180 degrees in a triangle. It's just the truth. And based on that, you can figure out 50 other or 100 other or 250 other things that are absolutely true based on those relationships. That kind of a surety of the unhindered practice that has condensed all of these massive teachings, which are gigantic, and made them pithy, put them in a capsule that you can take, and it gets you really good results with very few downsides. But even if there are downsides, you can mitigate them in small baby steps, breath by breath, get through them. So that you can correct yourself like an arrow. If you're bent to the right, you got to bend yourself to the left. Corrective austerities. Too greedy, too much this, too much of this, restlessness. Well, then what's the counter to that? Well, 1 meter monastery. I'm not going anywhere. Don't need to. Why? But it's also not a thing to go do something if that's what's necessary, because it's a zazen kind of practice. It's not attached to outcomes, but one is very interested in being skillful at all times. But understanding compassionately that that might not always be the case, but at least there's degrees of excellence that one can attain to in every instance, even though it be imperfect, because that is the human condition. That's part of it, changing forms and conditions. So you have to broaden your understanding of these concepts so that they make sense to you. And that's what practicing is about, because you're juggling these concepts and finally it clicks and synchronizes, and then you understand how one can achieve spiritual hygiene in a wholesome, Taoist, adaptive kind of way, but not just any old way, a virtuous way that absolutely has preconditions for it to be authentic, that one should not take lightly at all. If you want to make a magnificent dish, you cannot forget most important ingredients and not skimp on them like, oh, I take the cheap meat that fell on the ground and I'll just pack it in there because it doesn't matter. First principles of ethics and morality. Because I just want it fast in the pan, and I'm not going to savor every part of the process and keep standards to the highest forms of excellence that one possibly can, including the sharpness of one's instruments, the cleanliness of one's working area, the freshness of the other materials like water, basic material. It comes from a spring instead of a tap, perhaps. It's rainwater. It's a little bit different. No chemicals, trace chemicals in it. That it could be a tea ceremony. Then the tea is very perfectly conditioned, but what is perfect? There's different versions. There might be the over-dried version. There might be the too moist version, too fresh. There may be a mixture of the two. Different kinds that might have developed over time due to accidents or losses or changes in season that connect certain very meaningful ceremonies together into a fabric of unquestionable dignity and achievement, at least as far as the skill of that is concerned, of which one is the immediate benefactor if one has the privilege of engaging in such a thing with right effort and right view and right skillfulness, right panya, right wisdom, that it has developed over time in a very experimental, playful way. So it's very random at times, very raw and random mixes of things that might come together in such a way that is causal. The refinements of it are causal. And so we come back to first principles again and how to use these harsh automatic processes for our own benefit, but via the benefit of others, we arrive at the trueness of all truest of authenticities. That one has planted the seed, but then finally also harvested the fruit. The very succulent, fragrant, overripe almost, but not perfectly ripe nectar of the more thoughtful abodes. In any case, before I got off on the tangent of compassion, What I was trying to point out is that you can live in different time zones. And even if you're not in sync with day and night, like your day, just think the sun is pivoted. And so your day is in the early morning when the sun just comes up. Many monks get up at 3 a.m. for this reason. It sort of puts them out of sync with samsara in general. So you might just find it by surprise if you're, for some reason, in some kind of out of sync timeline. Puts you out of sync with everyone else, right? And also common, normal, vulgar ways of thinking. Some people might say, well, don't take it too far. Well, okay, fine, don't. That wouldn't be the middle path, would it? Hey, dummy, have you been paying attention? If some firebrand stands up, can't say that. Look, it's about stopping halfway there if you're going too far or too fast or anything else crazy, which people do because they're damn delusional, restless people that are hounded by other kilesas too. But that's not the end of the story, is it? Is that what a doctor would say to someone who has a condition like malaria? Or would they be compassionate enough to make some small suggestion for those who are just suffering needlessly, like terribly, that if they just heard this sentence, it could cure them indefinitely? If they could just have the privilege, the spiritual privilege, to hear and understand and cultivate these things within themselves, to manifest them, to then see, yes, what is genuinely good as far as others are concerned, because they manifest that it's more valuable than gold. It's like a meteorite. It's much rarer. Gold is everywhere. You can find gold toilet seats. A meteor, you cannot put any price on it that is commensurate with its true value. It is unique, but not something that anyone can use for just anything. Oh, I need a jackhammer. Let's pull that stone that we found in the desert out and start whacking it to dig a hole. It's not that kind of useful. See, common, normal, vulgar people pipe up, what's this all about? What does this really mean? That's not what it's about. It's about spiritual kind of attainments that have the theoretical implications of which go beyond all comprehension. So it has its own set of people that see things that way. They used to be called venerable teachers before people forgot what language meant or words in it. They were like, oh, I know that word. I can go to a dictionary, and that's what other people called them, but have no respect for any kinds of teaching or insight or health-giving practice. Just utter contempt and disregard. Instead, as contemporaries can do, like all the time, like for days and weeks and months and years on end, contemporaries and ideas and concepts of self that would get in the way of all those other things. If they would just get them out of the way, but then you see that's how normal people are, aren't they? Always focusing on the thing that blinds them from those fantastic, magical, enchanting states of mind that are just so life-bringing. When you finally make that connection and it's congruent, and that music is so fine, it's so uplifting, it's so resilient, so sparkling. As to be the true champagne of life, yeah, the best of the best that the spiritual path can offer, to abide in that instead of hell realms. That drives terrible people completely batty. The comparison rips them apart. But why would they hold on to something that would do that? Why can't they just let that go? That was a bad look anyway. Who needs a self like that? Get yourself a new one, like a better friend, better self. That's how you get better. I don't sneeze today. I did yesterday. I was sick. Now I got better. I don't sneeze. Very happy not to sneeze. But when I was sneezing, I still knew that it was a transitional kind of thing. And I had faith that I would get out of it. And I did. I haven't sneezed, it seems like, in years. But if I were to sneeze, it wouldn't bother me. I understand why it happens. Sometimes it's helpful. It clears something out. You know, one of those times I was falling down mountainsides through all different types of thistles. When I came to a rest at, 5,000 feet or something, a little dazed and confused, I had to sneeze a couple of times to get my respiratory system working again. And it was just fantastic after that happened. Now, look, that's just an example. It might have or not happened to me in that way. But a metaphor can serve to make it that way, to make it more palpable, more impactful, which is why it's called a vehicle. With the vehicle, you go faster, with more precision and comfort. You get to further destinations. But without one, you have your feet. Most people, they don't make it very far with their feet. Many of them have bound their feet. Their feet are very small and deformed. Muscles, knees, will. They can bring it to a certain point, but there's only so far they can go. But with a vehicle, it can be a very comfortable ride through very tough terrain for long periods of time, and can still be so satisfactory. So very insulated from all of those terrible things and conditions and changing forms and conditions. But not that one does not see them or is aware of them. One can look dispassionately out the window and gain the insight thereby. Anyway, comedy routine interruption here. Someone called in and said, Delaney, so as far as wealth management goes, how do you manage a trillion to the trillion kind of wealth? Thanks. Yeah, it sort of manages itself, even if you don't have it physically. It's sort of there. If you push your ATM button, it does come out. Like, it works. Yours works. It's not mechanical. But you've seen other wealthy people not have that capacity or capability. And so they were very poor, even though they had things that could be quantified in this dimension by third parties, but they themselves were broke as broke could be. Even worse, hungry ghosts. They picked up a appetite that shall not be satisfied in the dimensions to come, because there's karmic incongruence with their behavior and the unskillfulness that they have developed based on having those privileges in this realm, such as the satisfaction of sense desires that grow as you satiate them, oddly enough, which is to say the kilesas become stronger. And they win out in the end as far as consumptive personalities go, whether it be an appetite for masochism or punishment or blame or aversion or attraction, right? Desire. See, I want desire, I don't want aversion. Well, that's not, you can have both. And both end up being unskillful because they're known, they've been categorized. It's like in bumper cars, don't do this maneuver because you'll break your neck, kind of clear. At least ancient, highly civilized societies knew these things like the back of their hand, but not neo-barbarian ones that have the conceit that they are not that. It's not very helpful for redemption, is it, or improvement? But see, the wonderful thing about not having self or relegating self is that you can admit mistakes and not have them destroy a you or yours. And you can also cease seeing things in a certain way that would be so detrimental on a causic level, pragmatically and spiritually, if one did not have some hindrance or another, such as doubt, or other very filthy known things that keep people from making the right and wholesome and immediate decisions for themselves that are so impactful that it just decimates hindrances that would pop up even from time to time, so that they reliably get to these states of mind far above and beyond what they would if they were completely and utterly ignorant like most people are. Just know nothing kind of existence that we were all born into. Is that a surprise? But rather than cherish teachers, this culture disdains them. But perhaps not the culture of tomorrow. The good people are hiding. That's always a possibility. Look, it's just like valuable things. People do not put them on the street because you just can't know what's out there these days. And, we're talking about a failed globalism kind of period that hasn't been sorted out yet in various places on the globe. Now, if that's not where you're from, great, but it can change. And it can change real quick. And how about this? Changing forms and conditions. See how I just depersonalized that? I've wrapped it into a category of things that is perfectly neutral. It has zero acidity. It's infinitely zero because it's a category and it's not the thing you thought I was talking about. You see what philosophy can do when it's depersonalized? which is why all these idiots like to personalize things and moralize. You can't say this and that. It's some type of power trip. They know they're wrong. They're just playing games. They consider it one-upmanship. They think of the crappiest corporate culture you could possibly imagine. That's sort of the technique. It's a kind of bullying technique they adopt. So yeah, you can be in toxic social situations and also not be of that. You do not need to engage with tomfoolery. And whatever you're presented with on a day, it could be a 3-card Monte player in your piazza you never saw before, who, now for the last 4 days has tried to get in your face. You might just decide not to go there for a while, which is normal. And maybe 6 months later, that clown isn't there and you don't know what happened to him, but you heard that, he was ripped apart by dogs or something. But you never heard that story because there was no personal connection at all. And changing forms and conditions, it does take care of it. It takes care of them too. Because death, it comes to us all, good and bad. So what if they ran themselves into hell 5 minutes earlier or later? That's on them. Right? And if you're like wishing ill will towards them, then you see you're engaging in bad karma, even though it's calm and normal. It's vulgar and detrimental for the bardos because, see, you're subtly still in the realm of ill will. It's apparent if you see it. And when you do, you drop it, you correct it, and you say, hey, the good people see shifting focus, the million at least. Really, really, really good, great people hiding themselves or hidden by circumstances, changing forms and conditions. And old crap goes away and good crap, good stuff, not crap, it's a difference. Let us never forget that there are qualitative differences. If I'm within 50,000th and you're just within an eighth, world's a difference and it's quantifiable. So let's apply that to spirituality as well. How hygienic is your mind? Really? We talked about brushing teeth. Some people think they have great breath. And you have to convince them that your breath smells like garlic, right? Or fish, and some people get offended. And they say no, or see, they're still in the state of delusion. Denial. Just on the smallest, stupidest thing like that, if you can see that, you can see the bigger things. You can see how it starts. So you have to get very subtle with these things. Like, wait, where is this starting? And is it part of the realm of ill will? Then we can just depersonalize it and reject it. And not think that way, let alone act in any way. Because no effort being applied to what would otherwise be wrong effort, or muddled effort, or unquantifiable effort, that's not the effort that we commit. Because we would rather have time for samadhi to sort those things out. Because it's really important to sort things out before you do something, because only in that way can it really be skillful. Now, there's some people, they think they're so quick, they can multitask, but how good are they really? See, my comedy routine, I slow it down. I drop out of the theory. A, who do you know multitasks well in everything? And who can just maybe take care of one thing at a time? At best, that. At best, that. And that at best isn't very good either, is it? Because they're in a bad mood all the time. And they're getting eaten up from deep inside about this and that. And he said and she said. And instead of forgetting all of that, tuning it out and focusing on the really great things that aren't so apparent all the time. Sometimes it takes days and weeks and months in order to find those things versus being overwhelmed by bad things, which is really easy to do if you get right down to it. It is. It's easy. That's the easiest thing in the world. It's so common, it's so vulgar, it's so normal. But it's not super normal. And for anyone who says, no, you can't do that, it's just like them saying you can't brush your teeth and have great smelling breath most of the time without, of course, over focusing on it to the point that you're only fixated on that and not the other fragrances of life. Right? Our whole job is not just cleaning up defilements. See, a lot of people think, oh, this practice is just for crazy people or something. But no. If you catch it early, just like people, they have immaculate kitchens, well, they clean up directly after themselves. And they prepare with the right utensils and they put them back and they're sharp and the food is good. Because they have it very well managed. And it's not full of trash. And this doesn't work, that doesn't work. And there's bugs everywhere. And, oh wait, we have all these pots, but this pot has a hole in it, or this stuff is not cleaned. Essentially, you can't work, or you wouldn't want to prepare food there, versus that type of person's mind. That's where you might be, but that person, even who is in the worst kitchen, can fix it up. Even if it just means cleaning 2 pots today instead of none. Even though there's a pile of 100. That kind of comparison. Can you see that metaphor? Or does it need to be beaten over your head 1,000 times until you then pause enough? Perhaps because you're egoically engaged enough, because you feel insulted on some level, that you would fly over such a simple point and then not practice it yourself in areas that needs cleaning up, like in ill will or desire or delusion. Clean those 3 things up and then you can get back to reading what you wanted to read, the newspaper or texts or emails or stuff like that. But okay, that stuff comes in between. Maybe you can manage some of it, but manage less of it and then manage it better than you have been. Why can't you commit to that principle? Why can't you do that? Why can't you slow down and do that? Why can't you? Don't listen to those reasons. You can, with right effort and right view, you can do it. Start with those 2, and then there's so many more skills on top of that. But of course, you might need compassion first to get started. So step by step, right? It's like a chia pet. You have to do like 5 things first before stuff starts growing. Like the good stuff you cultivate versus the thorns and weeds and very poisonous kind of mushrooms and other things that will kill you or are unhealthy. How about like black mold? It is a separate life form, but humans should not be living so in close proximity. Now, I do realize there are mitigating things one can do, and science keeps improving these things. But still, architects need to plan, perhaps rather a kuti, or something that never gets infected by black mold in the first place. And that space that's created is so much more healthy by comparison. And that's just one analogy. So you can apply it to your entirety of your life, personally, individually, socially, historically, however you want to do it, whatever nuance you want that principle to take on in order to free yourself from at least that form of kilesa. So it's not just for crazy people, it's for practical people that don't smell bad and don't want to be around stench, and for good reason. because there's no good in it. And yet those that want to impose stench, well, that's just like the smokestack. Is it close enough? Can you close the window? What mitigating strategies can you use? That's what you have to put up with. And so it could be in any form of life, any stage of life, any set of people, any set of circumstances, changing forms and conditions. And that's just the way it is. Also, you don't have to get along with everyone. You don't. That's an impossibility anyway. So not getting along with 1 million people, that's really quite standard. So the randos that might be in your vicinity for some odd reason or another, that does not mean that they are the end-all be-all of whatever it is that's going on, because they ain't it. Need not be if one has no reason to do with them. And if you're not looking at problems anyway, because that's not part of your philosophy, then what does it matter? I was watching my feet as I walked on purpose, not because I wanted to offend some kingly personality or another, queenly, just because that's not the point of the exercise of walking in this way. So it could have been, you could have been Einstein, and it's sort of the same kind of situation. However, saying hi, being generally human and approachable is something quite different, but to an extent. Right? If it need be. If it not need be, it's not your business. That's how people used to be. That's politeness. You can't be any other way if you're civilized. So anyone can take offense at something and turn it around, and again, they just make themselves look like the kind of tyrannical sadists that we have rolling around here these days, unfortunately. So, but do they get to impose rules? That's just the way, we'll just have to see. If not, then not, and then why? So, again, we're talking about art that is made for someone perhaps 10 years in the future. Or how about this, 50 years in the past, 100 years in the past. This was for Shakespeare's, written for Shakespeare, see, a connection to the past. So it was really just for him. It was supposed to go in a time capsule, but it got leaked. So what did that have to do with you or this person or that person again? Nothing? Oh, wow. It's great we cleared that up before anything started, because what would be the point again? Where's the basis of anything? And I've run into beekeepers. I didn't tell them that they needed to stay in contact with me for some reason. I was very grateful to take the honey with me and pay them maybe even a little bit more, depending on my circumstances, as a thank you on top. But really in a genuine way, because it wasn't forced or expected. In fact, they didn't want to take it. And it really wouldn't have mattered if they didn't, because those people were very wealthy in real terms. Very wealthy, hard to see at the first glance, but indeed so. In real terms. But what they didn't recognize was the traveler was the same way. It just happened to be that he might have been a trillionaire. Okay, so like a trillionth of a trillionaire. So, but of course he didn't have it in his pocket. He just happened to have $100 or something. Okay? And maybe it wasn't money, maybe it was words instead. Maybe it was a heavenly recommendation, not a worldly one. One with all those divine seals and images and calligraphies and creatures written into it, carved into it, painted into it, to enliven the word of Logos to be applied to heavenly aims and heavenly achievement and heavenly honor. Amen. Getting back to time zones for a second. Yeah, changing time zones. That's something I've overlooked, but I've changed time zones so many times that I did get in the practice of doing it, although I can't recommend it, but it does shift your consciousness, and those subtle things can lead to a shift in consciousness or the habit of it. And it does require discipline. It requires training and acclimation. And if you can do those things, they're very beneficial as far as that goes in breaking you out of comfort zones and adapting to the reality of time that has shifted. In a very real way, 7 a.m. sharp in a different time zone means the exact same thing than in the time zone you left, but it just happens to be 3 a.m. and not 7 a.m. That's a big difference, isn't it? For all, see my comedy routine. For all you working people out there, do you understand what I'm talking about? Sleeping snugly in your bed, very deeply, very warmly, very comfortably. For those few precious hours between 3 and let's say 6 a.m., because you just need an hour to get to the place you're at. Because you're very well trained in how to get there and back. You know it with a surety, but how important those hours are. So the difference is big. And yet, once you shift, it might take, depending how old you are, so older people need longer, 3 months instead of 3 days. Depending on how crazy the time zone was. Why not? Why does that sound so strange to people who have never done it or have only done it 1 or 2 times? Maybe changing forms and conditions happen to you too. At 65, do you think it will affect you how again? Isn't it a little presumptuous to think it wouldn't affect you at some point? And then what are the subtleties of those effects? And are they positive or not? I mean, this is something, you can't necessarily recommend things like this. It's just an observation. But an observation of how one becomes observational by getting out of time zones, by increasing perspectionism or perspectionism, so that you can have optionality of view and then make the choice. Okay, look at these flowers here. They're only blooming right now this way. It's really maybe 3 days a year in some cases max. Why can't you take 10 minutes to look? Like, how busy do you need to be? And then maybe tomorrow or next week it's not those flowers, it's these flowers instead. You see? Changing forms and conditions. But if you're attached to the old flowers, well, then the new flowers don't look as good by comparison, do they? And then if you're worried, well, they're going to build an apartment building here anyway, so it doesn't matter, so I'm just going to not even pay attention. But guess what? They never built that apartment tower. The whole area just became more and more natural, and it became more and more beautiful, but you had written it off. In that parallel universe that you won't be going that way, but because you experienced it this way. Kind of perspectionality that matters. That can be the educational aspect of literature. That's why people used to read it, but of course if you get warped by it, well, then you haven't really achieved the high aim of literature in a moral or a worldly sense as far as gaining skill goes instead of defilements. So I cannot stress again, romanticism, this yearning, this desire for more. Does that sound like a realm to you? Oh no, not that. The realm of desire? Oh no. The picture of Dorian Gray? Oh no. Oh, could it be? Why? It was such folly. So see the moral of the story? How elegant, how well written. How instructional in what not to do or feel or see. And yet, look how people make the mistake because of what flowery language. That was not the intent of the author, but how many people get swept away by that rather than the clear message, don't do or live that way. So, dear ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, the potential for human civilization always exists. And it is either expressed well or poorly, depending on people, places, and things, and times, just different causalities that may be horrible and terrible for years on end because of different reasons. But that doesn't mean all people suffer, even if that's what what it's supposed to look like, that there's some social factor with malcontents or misguided, misanthropic kind of people or forces that are intentionally that way, but officially they're not. They're for the good thing kind of shtick. Well, that's what a charlatan is, isn't it? So imposter syndrome is real because it does exist because, yeah, bad people can't keep up their pretenses forever and still be popular, but that's what they want to be. So it's disastrous for them and anyone deceived by them, and yet at some point the wheels fall off a jalopy and nobody cares. And there are victims, deluded people, and terribly. That's the reason for not doing it. That's the reason for telling others not to do it, but also making it into such fine literary masterpieces that you cannot look away because of the elegance, the mastery, the beauty, the force, the tour de force of the topics that are eternal, and yet still they fail. It's a story of failure. But not your failure. So as far as people you don't know, for any reason should they come in your vicinity, that is not a reason to either be friends with them, chummy with them, how about this, in any way familiar with them. But just sort of there, okay, we have to do this, but Unless there's a reason to introduce yourself. I think that's just generally a wise strategy to pursue. And not necessarily as a strategy, but just to not necessarily open yourself up to these social pathogens, contagions, misguided people and opinions, or spiels of all kinds. And that's perfectly okay, especially as a young person, as someone middle-aged, and as someone who's very elderly too. So being too chummy is to be too, let's say, cordial. That's a thing too. See, I think also a lot of Americans were taught, yeah, be friendly all the time to everyone. But that's not a good strategy, is it? It's actually really stupid and corrosive and wrong. It's really only the right people at the right time for the right reason, and there's not very many of those, but maybe spiritual practitioners, but we know there's a lot of fakers in that game too. So I think people should have a reason to come into contact with someone, and not a reason that is off-putting, because that's sort of a disqualifier, isn't it? So do trust your instincts. Somebody creates some off-putting incident, it doesn't matter what they think you did, they're the reason. And that's it. Like, what else can they not do for you? It's not personal. It's just, okay, they're in your vicinity. You don't have to dominate any kind of sort of situation, period, because it's not about some kind of interaction at all. And so that's just marvelous. It's wonderful. It's very liberating, very productive, and very modern kind of way of being, instead of a cheery, dumb fool that bumps into people that are friendly at first until they have some reason for doing something stupid and thinking they could do it with you, or who knows what. People are really stupid and very vulgar. That's where the term comes from. So, and again, that's why people have front doors, and certain public-facing places have to take precautions to remain splendid, or not. Depends on the neighborhood and the management, doesn't it? And the neighborhood isn't just people that move in from anywhere, but people that have lived there for, in many cases, centuries, or not. And then what reason did they have to live there? Was it a financial reason? Well, maybe that wasn't a good reason. Especially when the finances are screwy. So is that how quality gets replaced with quantity? Maybe. But, changing forms and conditions. One place could go down the crapper and another place could come up. But, if there's very few places all at once for predictable reasons, at least by people who are paying attention, well, I guess that's just the type of cliff we're looking at. It's happened before in human history. 5th century UK. Anybody know? Anybody have a guess? 6th century? About the economics there for 300 years. Due to crappy personalities of the time and their day, their intrigues. So, the more you know, right? The less you need be deluded, and yet let us just cherish all of the treasures that place has produced for so long under the worst of situations and conditions and people, apparently. But that doesn't mean it's the end of the story. It's just a mixed bag. The good people, they're hiding themselves. But then again, not hiding themselves in some kind of maniacal or fearful way. It's just, that's what good people do because that's where they live and not, like I said, where the hoi polloi doth blast through. And hoi polloish things happen. Oops, that should not be surprising. So, yeah, being just friendly to everyone. Especially if you're older, of course, those days are over, but young people should be the same way. It's basically being an old head as far as being wise is concerned, not just being too tired to engage barbarian kind or barbaric kind of ideas. How about that? See, we take off the focus off people, put it on ideas. Long-headed ideas, anthropology, history. I mean, the list is long when you get to, cultural criminals and ideologues and bullies of all kinds. But, once you see them once, you can see them anywhere, and then just avoid it. That's it. That's the best strategy. But as good as it gets. I mean, you can't. If you can't, you can't. But we're always focused on that exceptional rule. But we shouldn't be thinking about it all because it really is possible to get away from bullying of that kind. In most cases, you just have to go to extreme lengths, including just walking away and never coming back. Just like some crappy restaurant, you're not forced to eat in it. So, what do such people accomplish in the end? Well, yeah, it's sort of a crapper strategy. Good people recognize it and shut it down. But bad people just let it, it's gray zone, so it doesn't matter really. But actually those things matter a lot. They really do. And stuff, piles up incrementally. Trash sidewalks leads to an impression of what? And yet it's just a simple thing to manage. But if it isn't, what does that indicate? Just little things, So, but see that in your life as well. It's just those little things, and then you make the changes. And then if you have no attachments, and it's not just a game, it is in truth the truth, then you can walk away from things you're detached from, can you not? No ego, no attachment. No people, places, and things, no attachment. And making it real for you, right? It's not some type of you're beating your chest in front of an audience that isn't there. It's doing it for real, really feeling that way. It might just seem to be theory to you now, but if you put it into practice, why can't it be so? My comedy routine. We're talking all this high flying methods and theories and literature. Nobel Prize winner, by the way, I guess at least 5 times. I gotta check my mailbox. Sure they shipped it in. Oh wait, Compassion sent the email, but I guess the Nobel Committee didn't figure it out yet. But anyway, dumb people. Ooh, let's bring it real low for a second. Why do people call them dumb? Why does that word exist? Does it exist? What is dumb? Well, it's what dumb people do, isn't it? Ba-dum-boom, psh. Yeah, look around. There's a reason why that word is in the dictionary, and it just might be you at times. So please don't think Just because you can see some dumb people, you can't see your own dumb things. So have a little compassion, but have a lot more awareness and put in the right effort every day, every mind movement, in every situation, even if that might mean appearing to be unfriendly to unskillful people. It's better than making a fool of yourself. And that's what dumb people do, don't they? But it is the dumbest people, isn't it, that think they smart, especially when they don't. They're the dumbest people of all, aren't they? So that might be you. See, then the crowd stops laughing. Boo! See, they thought they were laughing at someone else. And I pulled out the mirror and they saw themselves. But that's the point. Laugh at yourself or a self. That's not you. That's not yours. You can be dumb for a time. All children are dumb when you get right down to it. That's why people don't trust them with matters requiring wisdom. But they do that skillfully. But sometimes you can overdo that. You can keep doing that once your children are raised. You're treating them still like children when they're adults. Well, that's inappropriate, isn't it? But it's common, normal, and vulgar to do that, but you can also stop doing that. You can say, well, this is a person, and they're fully formed, and they can live their lives. They will have to. They will have the karma from that, the causality from that, no matter what they think of their father or not. Their personal story doesn't matter. Imagine me beating a drum about my grandfather. Well, he was so neglectful. He never picked me up from polo practice. I had to walk the whole way, 3 kilometers. And it was rueful. Imagine if I were to do that. Would I be foolish? I think so. But look at these people laying on a couch complaining about their parents thinking they're skillful, and the people who earn money by doing that. So is that not a whole bunch of tomfoolery when you get right down to it? Once you've read the Tripitaka, what is your opinion now? Expert, so-called. So, does equality exist? Well, no, it doesn't. That's delusional. So it's not inferiority, it's not superiority, and equality. No, that's no on all 3 counts. So keep going. You could probably say no more than yes. It's not going to change life at all. You're going to just have a long, boring conversation with a dogmatic person that's looking for some kind of abstract point that is meaningless. Well, maybe not. It's manipulative. It's sort of pushing you in some agitprop direction. So maybe that's the reason why you should disengage from it or disabuse yourself from doing such things. But that would be funny, wouldn't it? If people one day woke up and stopped doing that en masse, and everyone was superhuman in that regard at least. What a paradise. Hey, come on, utopianists. Can't you be delusional about that? One day not being delusional. Maybe if you laugh hard enough, it'll happen. Another thing to consider, if you pick up a bag of litter on your walk, just because you're walking and you happen to have a spare trash bag or a plastic bag, it has a lot of different uses. You can carry stuff with it, including trash. If you happen to be walking by a trash place, you can put it in the bag and then put it where it belongs in the trash can, because we have a lot of neo-barbarians that might not have understood that littering is a bad thing because they're that far gone or that antisocial. Essentially, people who don't give a damn where they throw trash are that, are they not? So if they are that, then okay, but why let them trash the environment if you can help it? And it's not a big deal. You could look at it as some kind of training exercise, because how much trash have you lost? Just maybe a wind gust came and blew a napkin out of your hand. So just imagine you're paying back your karma and maybe past lives even. Just by being a good citizen like that without looking for praise, and then realize that other people, like trash men, have picked up so much more trash than you, so it's not a big deal. So, and think of it in terms of your aggravations and irritations, how much other things other people have thrown away and have not been looking for some kind of full-on recognition for your greatness as a human being, because how much trash have you thrown away again versus those other people I just mentioned? Probably nothing. So even if it's not perfect, the person who might have thrown away 95% of the trash is still working. It's just that 5% is what you notice, which is trashy enough. But if you're there, then you make the final review, and then that area isn't trashy, at least for the time being, until it gets trashy again via changing forms and conditions. And it's just a practice. It makes no sense. It's part of almost an absurdist practice, but it's fun that way. You never know what you're going to meet. Tequila, empty tequila bottles, banana peels, dancing shoes, you name it. Wigs, old lipstick cases, cigarette butts. Just such a diversity out there, and all of it belongs in the trash, doesn't it? So you can see your thoughts like that too if you're don't have an ego problem. And then your whole area is very serene, and it's not a permanent state. And so you see how it's a metaphor in a certain way. But don't get too big for your britches. It's not the other people that are the problem. It's just this dimension. It's purgatory. Yeah, but taking a positive view on things and being proactive in it is part of the heavenly abode. But of course you can take and leave places, and you will anyway, because none of us are getting out of here except feet first. Like we came in, feet first out too. Whether you're a parachutist or not, this life throws us all in the grave. So don't be too big for your britches. What burdens do you have again? And how terrible are those burdens? You got to put an old lipstick case in the trash can for somebody that might have lost it under strange circumstances. Who knows? Everything can happen in this realm that happens. I read a story the other day. A man found a rock that shouldn't have been in a clay area, and he lifted it up. It was extraordinarily dense, very heavy for its size, and he thought he found gold. But it turns out he found something more valuable than that. He found a meteor, something that was in space, something that did not belong to the planet natively. Quite unique, very rare. But for Paduginas, it's just a rock they can't spin. And so they see nobleness like that too. But that's not true, is it? It's spent in appreciation of a life well lived and well cultivated, despite the horrendous conditions in some times and places due to, yes, the human factor as well. But yeah, this bardo, it's not perfect. Not even close, but sometimes it's not so bad. Sometimes it's just good enough. So do see things that way. On the other hand, you got to ask yourself what kind of high society lives so high that they can just ignore all the litter around them and play pretend about ego games that mean nothing except to the most vulgar, misguided people the planet has perhaps ever known. But who would be one to say that to them directly when it makes no sense if one not get worked up about every little piece of thing that one could get worked up about. So there's so many different facets to awareness that one can deepen and then extract and remove and refine out of one's life so that no kilesas are left, which is to say you go past what a normal person would go to get rid of it. But when is the day going to come when all the smokestacks get taken down and there's no smoke or dust or noise left in this world? If there be a lot of people rousting about. So, look, some things, in fact, all things, especially the closer you get to people, the less perfect it gets, but there's better places than others. And so even if we have to go back into the past in our minds, we can do that. We can endure something ridiculous for a time, even if it's more than 5 minutes. Look how long my comedy routine has gone on. It just keeps giving and giving and giving for all those future generations of civilized people into thousands of years of just high and mighty laughter at all of the comedic foibles that can be foisted off on one, especially in one's time. Was it different in Shakespeare's time? I pray, tell me that that is so, if that would and were and is impossible. Not good enough for Shakespeare, that's what neo-barbarians are. But not just him, the whole kit and caboodle. And so don't make any kind of subnormalcy your baseline. Quite the contrary. Your new normal, somebody put this in OSHA, as little aggravation as possible. Just like your air, it should be as pure as possible, but total purity, that's not always possible. But you will do the best you can do. And if those fumes start getting through the door, start seeping, give yourself a wet towel and put it in the crack. If you got to wear a mask for a time, do that too. That's just the way this crazy world works. Don't make it worse than it need be. We're all going to get through this together. At least the Kalyanamitta will, no matter what. With bodhisattva seriousness, profoundness. Oh yes, that does work. But normals and subnormal people, they said no. It couldn't work because it certainly didn't work for them, did it? Not a damn thing worked for them. In the end, in fact, like I said, the theory is they don't come back as humans, ever. Now you would think that would scare some of them, but no. Some of you might have guessed that doesn't impress them at all. Doesn't keep them from flinching. And I don't care how many times they take it to the face. That thing out there called life, it'll crumple on eventually. You ever see a glass jaw in slow motion? Hit with the full force of something called life, it's going to take them down, drop them. So if that's you, that's what's coming. So what type of person would tell you to take it straight in the face like that, or in the heart? other than a damn fool. But they're out there. They were there in the 5th century BC and way before that. But this realm of sortum, though, rest assured, it's automatic. It's called causality. Even scientists are onto it. At least the reputable ones, not the imposter calling themselves scientists. And there's a whole lot of them, aren't there? They always have been selling snake oil. But this stuff, just one spoonful, one my moment, it's so powerful. It's so liberating. It's so, what is that perfume scent in the infinite number of lotuses descending from the heavens? Kind of goodness versus that. But is that going to keep dogs from barking at the moon? And if they bark and that not be you, need it aggravate you if you use it as practice instead? Who will transcend to skillfulness faster, do you think? Someone with something magical like the jade diamond vehicle, or someone without. Which is to say, sorely lacking in all dimensions. But remember not to take it to the point of cursing others, because cursing others would be in the aversionary realm. So you have to be able to catch yourself before you reach that point, or quite a long ways before you even get close to that point. Because why would you drive through a neighborhood like that of thoughts, let alone people? And remember, the Jade Diamond vehicle is not a bus. It's built for, well, 1, 2, 3, a limited amount of people. Because individually, it's the sort of the thing. You have to have it yourself for it to work. But you can lose it if you forget about it, can't you? That vehicle does leave the dusty and the busty behind, doesn't it? As that turbo-fueled and tuned engine initiates, and the velocity and torque pick up in such a magnetic way. So here's a very cool core principle. It's just being beneficial. If you're beneficial to yourself, you're definitely going to be more beneficial towards others. And just let that osmosis process happen. But don't be outcome independent. You don't have to transform into the most loved person on earth, but you probably will be a little bit more lovable if you can at least love yourself, and not just have that be a word, but deepen the concept so that you're truly good to yourself as your best friend, and not worst enemy. Yes, you are someone or a being that has mammalian tendencies that can lead us astray. But that does not mean that you're a horrible animal or a barbaric animal. You're a human being. Have some compassion for yourself and others. But again, not too much. Don't lay and wallow in unnecessary suffering. If you can just change your mind on a few just key points and depersonalize things, and realize we can be very, very easily deluded by just about anything. Somebody can tell us, see, the comedy routine starts. They tell us it's going to be bad weather. It's going to be the worst storm ever. And they're working themselves up and working themselves up. And then That storm, it never comes. It misses you by a mile. And we do that about anything and everything, and can happen at any time for any reason in the whole wide world now. It's global. We got people going crazy here, there, and every which way but loose. Is that not so? Or have you not been paying attention? Probably not. You don't know what's happening right now in XYZ place, but those people are probably very much like you. They just want the best for themselves and others. And yet, look at all that suffering out there. But a lot of it is causal. See, that's where the scientists should sort of switch on in the back of your mind in a dispassionate way, too, to have that ability to not take oneself so seriously, not be too greedy, not have too much ill will or aversion. Why? When you're snorkeling off the coast of some Mediterranean paradisiacal kind of place, does everything need to be perfect at the bottom of the ocean, or is it fascinating just the way it is? Now, look, okay, some places are polluted and what have you, no doubt. But how much of it really isn't or isn't enough that you wouldn't appreciate it on some level just the way it is, although it's imperfect? So you should see yourself. And it can be a paradise like that. You've had good moods in the past, haven't you? In past lives, perhaps when you were young and carefree. Even if it was just for your 5th birthday, and never, ever, 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 ever again after that. And yet you never forgot that moment. And so it is possible, friends. That's the good news. But you just don't get there by accident, usually. You have to put in the practice. That's the whole point of it. But it builds a bridge to the heavenly abodes. So a bridge maker of that kind, if he is not socially acceptable, then perhaps the society that surrounds him is not acceptable. Why should they be acceptable and the good things not? Wouldn't that be an inversion of all things good? And what would be the point of that? Some moral principle? What would that be again? Something against compassion and understanding and boundaries, which are very healthy to have individually and socially, that they should be respected. And that's what dignity is founded on, grows in, it cultivates, will be cultivated in those kinds of social spaces. Again, isn't that a marvelous thought? Instead of everything is so terrible everywhere all at the same time, but that's not true. Carve out the smallest niche for yourself that you need to live. Start there. Stop complaining. Stop being driven away again and again and again and again. Pulled away from serenity and purity and liberation by these attachments that are so unreal and yet so real all at the same time. And yet they will not prevail in the end. What skillful practitioner would let themselves stay so bound to such suffering for no reason other than the reasons that the Kalesas have, which are bogus? See, comedy routine starts again. Yeah, they're bogus, they're fakers. They don't know what they're talking about. It's someone, you've met people like this. These are people that make their case, they're very compelling, but they're lying the whole time, but maybe they're lying to themselves most. They're convincing, you see, but in a bad way. Well, your mind can play these tricks on you as well. Nobody can bully you more than you can yourself. That is the self as bully. Trashing a place, there's nothing skillful about that. And if people call trash art, well then look, they're captured by what they see to be something that just snares them, but is objectively just trash. And not anything good, especially not compared to nature, like God's kingdom or natural things, which is something that's nice to have as a juxtaposition to urban life, right? Or just working in cubicles instead of having just a little bit of some kind of natural ambiance that isn't trashed, like your mind shouldn't be trashed, the garden of your mind. So there's all different types of trash, and there's cultural trash, there's theological trash, there's historical trash, like alternative history trash, narrative trash, spin trash, news trash, information trash, mass trash, plastic bottle caps trash, diapers trash, half-eaten something or other trash, bottles, broken ones and whole ones, big ones and little ones, and strips of plastic, and cigarette butts, and those cheroot pipes. Again, shoes, and paper plates, anything that comes to mind that people could carelessly throw away. Plastic spoons and forks. Just carelessly antisocial, or perhaps it was just the wind that blew it there, or a lawnmower that shredded it and spread it instead. Just carelessness, no ill will anyway. And even if it was there, what would be the intention of connecting with that? Again, what's so alluring about ill will once you know about the three dimensions? Is it so fascinating, like it might have the conceit that it is, when it's absolutely not? It's as fascinating as kilesas are, which are mind poisons, which are basically trash, right? Poison. So yeah, very unskillful people might get involved with unskillful things for the worst reasons in the world, and it turns out terribly. That's the causal relationship. So yeah, what are you missing out on again? That unnecessary suffering, stupidity, degradation, inanity, insanity, that's what you're missing out on. Well, boy, that's a whole lot. You missed multiple 18-wheelers that people are getting crushed under by the millisecond around this world, but not where you are, but where they are. But they can stop doing that too, if they attain some level of skill, such as basic humanity or compassion towards others and themselves. But if they don't, that's one of the symptoms that they show, is just total and utter disregard and disdain for their surroundings. That's it. But the environment is like that. A wind gust can come and blow over a wooden shed, and it has absolutely no regard whatsoever for the ownership structure or the work that went into, or the hopes and aspirations of the person that built the little wood shed, that really didn't want to cause any offense and didn't. Finally, it was just the weather that blew his little house down. So there's, what do they say, the worldly winds. Oh, that's a wonderful concept. The worldly winds are blowing. Me laddies and lasses. Ain't they? Or have they stopped? But yeah, you can shield yourself from them And one of the best things is a poncho, but not just anyone, like a very good one. That does go a little bit longer than other things in other places, and it's that simple to carry with you. But woe to that person that does not have it at the right place at the right time, or it's too cumbersome to carry because they don't get far, do they? But then again, there are people that hold cards, and there are people that hold wisdom, and sometimes you hold wisdom, sometimes you hold cards, sometimes you have both, sometimes you have none. Worldly wins. So remember always, this dimension was not meant to be your comfort zone. And so not being comfortable to the point that you would stop practicing, for example, or just live a unreflective kind of existence, or unreflecting. That would be very foolish. And also to be overly worldly, overly attached, overly mesmerized, overly charged with attraction and desire would not be wise, would it? Because you're attracted to these things, well then they exert a type of influence on you, and it might not be a good one, such as you're doing the thing that doesn't make sense for different reasons that you rationalize, but ultimately are illusory, delusional, denialist. So, but what about civilized kinds of relationships that have the flexibility that allow people to be different without having animosity towards them? Oh, whoa, wait, stop. That's possible too? See, highly noble people of mind will be shocked to hear that some people are probably hearing that, like the lowest, the people who have crawled with their hands and feet out of terrible places. That thought that they could be free of that is something that they cherish more than the intellectual class. See, that's the other thing. The intellectual class is usually comfortable enough that they can engage in conceit without much consequence, and so they do. And yet, what does that get them? Is it more skillfulness or less? Let's listen to the people that know what they're talking about, not padoojas that want two things that you can't have at the same time. So what do you pick, wisdom or all those other things that are so illusory, so attractive, so enticing, and so aversionary, and so off-putting, and so disappointing too. Both at the same time, isn't that straight? They fit together like a hand in a velvet glove of crimson red color. Holding perhaps the biggest diamond you've ever seen. It's just sparkling in the sun, or a moonbeam, or both at the same time. Someone wrote in and was like, DJ, I know you don't like talking about politics, but some of your observations are so damn accurate. Could you please expand on some of those concepts? Thank you. Well, here we go again. It's absolutely right. I don't like talking about it because we live in a very bad time for politics, don't we? comedy, routine, comedy routine activity. I mean, everybody notices it. It's supposed to be participatory, but we got the Orwell pig operatives that hog all the spots, not necessarily directly, but certainly via their proxies, which have more of a corporatist appearance to them. Like there was a job interview and they showed up and they're ready to do that for money. Kind of a lack of authenticity that they have. So they're I've come up with a new term for it because bag is a little bit. I do like bag, but it takes some getting to know what those what the acronym stands for, and people have long since forgotten who Benedict Arnold is. So we can read PC. They're PCs. That's people belonging to the plantation class. So they're PC, plantation class. And they're Opies, Orwell's pigs. I think that's a good one too. Orwell's pigs via Animal Farm. It's very clear that he knew what the landscape was looking like in a post-World War II kind of world, that he was already well aware of how it was going to shake out, because he was snowed by the Stalinist modernist vision, and then he began to see that, just like in Animal Farm, they were all on the same side via the Roosevelt kind of New Deal situation, that the Americans got that version of it. Now realize, like, Winston Churchill was well more, let's say, much more well-versed, or let's just say slightly cynical compared to Roosevelt, who was in La La Land with the pseudo-intellectual post-Civil War kind of anti-Americans that were in a pseudo-intellectual kind of banking class that sort of defines the Opies, the PC Opies we're dealing with. So when did the Opie era start? I would say, I've said the 1990, I've just said it like that, but if we're going to look at political operatives, yeah, we're looking at the Bush family. They got their wealth from Wall Street. Any stockbroking families or banking families. J.P. Morgan, another absolutely despicable figure in history. Someone like that, his personality traits. Then you have, again, family dynasties based on Wall Street. These were just people that allowed the worst people in the world literally to buy into good industries, good and productive and profitable industries, switched out the management, and that's what we turned it into a plantationist model. So PC Opie. So the Opie period, we'll say politically at least, the modern version of it started with Bush the First. And I think he's a good example because you can see how he glommed himself onto the Reagan movement, which was more of a Western movement, Western cultural kind of movement, pushback against the dictator alliance kind of failed ideas. They were so obviously apparent. For example, the Stalinist snow job, that he was the one that pushed back on that, and Eastern Europe and Russia profited by that for a couple of years until they got also their OPI kind of version of governance, but more of a criminal nature, right? Just street thug and security kind of people, sans any political wrappers. But wait, of course they have a political wrapper. It's just very micrometer thin. Best guy in the world. He's going to do everything right for all time. Don't question that. And here's the big round white table of OPs that divide up the loot. And essentially that's it. It's a handful of people. So you want to look at it as like a political and economic cult of a very small number. You know, I put it at 10,000 at most, maybe even worldwide. That's too much. In a country, maybe it's at best 500 people, maybe 100. So, and yeah, they've also, let's say there's a galley slave taskmaster class, which are these corporatist robots, do anything for money essentially. Be they American or what UK robots, they're around. Argentina has a robot. These are the interview people. They polished up their resumes. They're willing to be proxies for the PC OPs. It's pretty rare that the OPs come out themselves, because then they're subject to public scrutiny, like you know, the Bidos and family dynasty, or who's another OP, good OP from what is it? I mean, the Bushes are perfect OP examples. Well, yeah, we're nominally conservative, but we don't believe in anything about the country except, yeah, ripping it off and allowing foreign influence to spread. And we get a cut on that kind of people. So who do they not like? Well, they don't like authentic leadership, but they will glom onto it if they can, and pursue a glomming strategy, preferably close enough to be influential, but not in the spotlight. So this is sort of why some of them like Trump, because he's up for sale, right? He's sort of an up for sale kind of business dude. Now, I'm not saying he totally is, but to an extent, he's influenceable by wealth and not necessarily only national ideas, national culture, or ethical principles. Now, that can be overdone. You know, the left that just has a Marxist-Leninist exclusionist model of PCOPs can tolerate no variance from their own particular cult-like group. It's a political cult method, at least. They aren't popular, are they? Because of that. Whereas the craven and cowardly and dishonest variety of opiism is, again, this glomming strategy that isn't an outright tyranny, but does give them the position and the influence that they want to have, without total control like the left tends to create in their hegemonic kinds of political elite criminal systems tend to devolve into. They start coming up with tyrannically sadist measures that they then enforced legally or extra legally, which is why they have a nomenclatura kind of problem that would have to be addressed to roll back their pernicious influence. But yeah, they don't care about tanking economies because it's all about power. Right? The bulimic doesn't care about being thin in a attractive way. They've adopted thinness for the sake of thinness, which in its physical manifestation is some kind of starving, self-harming entity that looks utterly horrible, and yet it's not a physical disease, it's psychological with physical attributes, which is what they manifest if they have the power to do so. Or if the public is unaware of what they're actually looking at and not just a thin person. So yeah, the Opie era politically in the United States began with Bush the First, continued through Bush the Second. Again, nothing conservative about them except appearances. They're galley slave taskmasters, they're corporatists for pay. They have no requirements on that. And their opposition is the national opposition. So don't think for a second that they're on anybody's side except the Opie side, the PC Opie side. Remember, it's not politically correct, although it sort of is, but now it's the plantationist class because there's a lineage. People against the Revolutionary War, the so-called royalists, they were all over. And then, yeah, I know Southerners aren't going to like to hear this, but yeah, the plantationist class in the South looked down upon all different types of people, not just the black ones. And they kept them also like slaves, socially, economically, and otherwise. Didn't belong to the Opie class? Well, that was it. Enough said. You could be a brilliant person, a good person, a dedicated person, an authentic person. They wanted nothing to do with you. You were trash. Per the Anglo-Saxon model, which look how it's working for the UK, i.e. not at all. Because their PC Opies, they just sold out. That's it. Once you get past the proxies, you're talking about a predatory class of rent seekers that, to maintain their power, decapitate the native leadership or undermine it for their own conceit, because they're rich and their opposition is poor. And so who's better again? What benefits do they have from that? On a chicken-headed plantation, when they're into personal vanity and not into ethics or doing it the right way or legitimacy, like true legitimacy. So they, again, have a wealth guarding. That's the Opie motive, wealth guarding strategy. That their wealth is much more important than their neighbors or regions or cities or countries. So, but does that sound like nothing can be done about it? Well, of course not. It just means the reforms have to be more extensive. It has to be, you're dealing with the nomenclatura, and you're dealing with a defunct financial system and a proxified political landscape, PC Opie style. So we're in the Opie era, even though they didn't, or nobody knows about that at this time. Started in 1990 in the US, overtly, although a big Opie was LBJ, not conservative, just pretending to be that, operating amongst, Opies essentially, but not coming out and saying that he was overtly against the natives' leadership or culture, but taking a deal, and his finances prove it, as well as most likely him being the one, at least him and his interests behind Kennedy, and again, his brother, who had nothing to do with Kennedy himself, so that does sort of indicate that it was a party thing. You know, the Rhino contingent. Kind of equivalent on the other side of the aisle kind of thing. Because oddly enough, the Democrats were considered conservative in the South, for example, for historical reasons. So they were sort of the pre-Opis or pre-rhinos from the other side, which had become as abstract anyway at that point. So how do PCOPs operate? Well, yeah, how to put it? Co-option and dissimulation, or snowing people. Oh no, what do you want to hear? All right, let's have a group of people make me appear that way. Here's my silver star for bravery. Let me wear it at all opportunities. Anyone want to question my patriotism? Just point them to that. But how many Americans did he get killed again? See, they want to blame it on JFK, but JFK was going to wind it down for good reason. No business. It was a failed French project. Just look at the logistics. And so he knew it was a loser, but not for him. So you see the Opie style. He made his green, and all those other guys that weren't even closely like him in the patriotism department, they went away and never came back, or if they did, they were just looking for a job, and most of them couldn't hold it down based on all of the bad experiences that he prepared for them, internationally and domestically. Kicked off a anti-cultural program as well. What Stalinists? They were good people. They just something went wrong with them. It was the Russians' fault. Their economics, actually, it makes so much sense. Central planning. A bunch of people at the top that are rich and wealth guarding, and trash below that. That's actually a system that should work, shouldn't it? And if it doesn't, oh well, I guess I know where I belong as a PCOP. But openly stating that, no, that's not in their interest. He was a hunky-dunk, okie-dokie kind of drawl person. So look at him, look at the old film presentations he's in with his big old head. If the big bodies, big heads, big mouths, big butts, yeah, that sort of defines him. That greed, that's multi-generational, sort of defines them in a way. They like to eat a lot. Some people are like, how many steaks can you eat in a day? Well, they eat a lot more than you might think. And all it does is make him bigger and goofier, and that's certainly what he was. So also all of his mannerisms really fake. He was some kind of teacher in nowhere, Texas. But a big political leader, that he got on board with that one. That con, basically a con man. With J.P. Morgan like friends. That like con men like him on their side, not on the side of the country, or its culture, or its people, or its traditions, or anything else. That's all abstract. Money's the real thing for them. Money's not abstract. but actually it is, and so is their system, and it's not good. And yeah, it has a gigantic disinformational component that is also tied to capitalism. If you want to take Adam Smith at face value, a discredited economist, which, by the way, he was English, and the UK had a acrimonious relationship with free Americans, at least the original ones, but not the Opies and Bags or PCers. So, yeah, they're galley slave taskmaster proxies that they're chummy with in like a antebellum South kind of way, without any of the good parts of the antebellum South. That's how you can see them. They're pretty slick. They think, at least. Money buys them every advantage that they can get, but finally, look at their luxury class, the luxury class trolling that they've taken, the dunking they've taken. Because, see, just because you have money and are very vulgar and have traitorous proclivities does not mean that you're going to be making the right decisions for yourself all the time, that you can't be snowed yourself. Because essentially, people that are in it for the money are already snowed, even though they have the conceit that they're not, and that everyone's just like them, make the decisions just like them. If they could rip everyone else off, they would do it too, wouldn't they? They're just lying. You're lying. You're not better than me. See, I'm already working on a movie to show the misguided psychological and philosophical principles that they have without pointing any fingers. I think people that have taken public political positions, that's their karma, that they are criticized in this way, that they went that far to be named historically as bad actors. But other than that, personal conceit of these people, there's no responsibility or necessity to follow anything that they set up or did or wanted to any degree. In fact, there's a historical obligation and responsibility to dispense with anything they ever did or were associated with. And as well as the historical airbrushing that they have paid for and continue to pay for, and that their class of PCOPs continues to propagate and perpetrate against the truth in mankind at this time. So we're already talking about the late stage, horrible year of 2024. Essentially 30 years of infamy on the Opie plantation. Who's another Opie? I just think they do deserve it. Well, okay, Bido is an Opie. They usually have mush brains. Their vanity, narcissism is so ingrained they will go to the end. These the Opies, like pigs, like they will not move back from that trough, even when it's wise for them to do so. Who is he? His brain is rotted out. He's like 94 years old, from Kentucky. Can't speak in front of a camera, but has a team propping him up, kind of Opie. Supposedly a conservative rhino. Senators, yeah. What's his name? So forgettable, really. But just for the standpoint, or from the just for this purpose of education, was it? They call him Darth Vader in the swamp. That nexus of places where all of the tax money gets diverted into private coffers kind of place. Some zone like that with the nomenclatura and wealth guarding lawyers and Blobists. What's his name? I wanted to say McCain because McCain was one of those too. Hanoi hotel kind of sellout on a political level. But it's sort of close to McCain. What is his name? So forgettable. McConnell, just like McCain. See, McCain, McConnell, who are these sellout families? Yeah, McConnell, a particularly historical textbook kind of personality for Opies, yeah. They do like those places that were at least nominally conservative with conservative values that they just glommed off on for reasons of vanity. You know, Texas is another one. But doing nothing but undermining the culture and the financial system and meritocracy itself the whole time. So, and then vain enough to put themselves in front of the camera and cheap enough not to even put up the money for a proxy. Vain enough to want the spotlight. Yeah, they get historical mention. These are people of disrepute and lifelong service to the destruction of the country. So look at them, and they're mush-brained, last gasping versions. Guppy fishes a hot air before they take that final step into the bardos where being a human probably will never be a thing for them, although we don't want to speculate on matters like that. And we do wish them all the best, and maybe at the last moment they'll have a find Jesus moment, but we would wish that for them, wouldn't we? And who's his crappy replacement or colleague? Well, Senator Wise, that's another one. So just got to look into these people. Now, I'm not saying that anybody has all the dirt on them yet, because McConnell somehow passed all vetting procedures, and nothing he did was deserving of note. Apparently, to the pseudo-intellectual journalism out of a canned disinformation branch wing of the OP class, but why should that surprise us? But as far as the denizens on these plantations, you do have an interest in vetting your political representatives, and anybody that comes out PCOP is not in your interest, and you do need to take these things seriously because they are in your vital interest. They are also the legacy of the true culture of your ancestors in this place, and not the way the PCOP see it. So seeing them as part of the process and not accepting them, their proxies, or their policies is the other part. And not taking them at face value, realizing that having a class of people pissing in the face of everyone else with wealth guarding strategies and unethical practices is not how the future of the country or civility of any kind is secured now or in the future. So this is your wake-up call. I hope that answers your question, your request, but this is an ongoing thing of discovery, isn't it? But remember, you got to look now so they started off senators, so because that was, again, a minority kind of position in the government that they targeted. But now you got to look at governors. These governors are as bad as they get, and also mayors of cities. They've spread out. And the current financial system is their backbone, but that could be broken and it can be redone. It's very easy, which is why their political attack is a attack on that happening, really, because that's the only thing that keeps them alive. But stranger things have happened. Alexander, now I'm not saying this is the equivalent, but when his people had too much loot that they could not go further, well, he had the baggage train set on fire. And then they were, it took them a few days, but then they were back. They got their minds right. So you can get your country's mind right without PCOPs or their financial system backers, friends, conspirators, stooges, however you want to name them, from the left, right, or straight, front and center of the robotic variety. That being said, I want to return to the depersonalization process. See, we are taught that just because people can belong to your country, that they're for the country, but why would that be? See, there's so many counterintuitive things, people that would just pretend to be that and then not do that. Why should that be so surprising? So, look, you have to just think of these people as deeply flawed and failed. Worldly people that have committed indescribable kinds of crimes against all good peoples of this planet, of which just screwing over the people they were supposed to represent is just a small fraction, because it could lead to potentially billions and billions of deaths by giving even a square centimeter or square inch of influence of bad actors to places that they facilitated. Just creating an alternative future for the world, or allowing the potentiality of that to even become some kind of possibility. Even so, again, people would think 20 years ago we're living in a science fiction kind of reality. Well, they made that all terribly, terribly, indescribably, terribly worse than it could have been. So whatever money they got for that is really just abstract, isn't it? Abstract, and not really worth thinking about. And certainly personal acrimony, what would that bring? Finally, it's just good to know, just like in Plutarch's Lives, when you read of the just utterly misguided kinds of personalities of history, what not to do and what to look for when vetting political representatives and classes of people to identify and pillory in the public forum and exclude from any kinds of positions of responsibility going forward. So in that case, look, they might have a net beneficial effect. You see how you can switch karma to make bad things instructive. Maybe that will be the one seed that keeps them from the hell realms for eternity and their entire families, going into the multi-dimensions. So maybe it's not a bad thing that they would be so bad, to be so blatant, to be so instructional to us at this time and for future generations. So yeah, the disinformational component with the pseudo-intellectual class that's been feeding you misanalysis for the last 30 years, they're a big part of the problem. So this message, if it reaches you, this download, this brings you up to speed and gets you through that fog of poisonous gas, misdirections, and clownings and trollings that the PC the PCOPs kicked off with LBJ. But we're turning the corner with that. So everything that is even remotely connected to that is discredited from this movement forward historically. And it's like cleaning up a toxic waste dump. It's a super fun site, politically, culturally, socially, financially, psychologically, and so on and so forth. So that's it. You take this little pill, and all of that disgusting, subversive poison can go away, like quinine and malaria. But yeah, there's still people invested in that narrative, and so do be advised of that. There are people that will not change their minds or repent. They're going the hard way out of this realm. So don't help them, but do help us all turn this corner, because it's not just the United States of America, but the entire Western world and civilization that's at stake. Of which, yes, Russia is a part, Ukraine's a part, right? Eastern Europe's a part, UK's a part, United States, Australia's a part. So your political leadership matters. They've failed on levels that are inconceivable to good people, but not anymore. And now we know why, and so do you. So God bless you all. Now, as far as identifying them goes and their cultural malign influence, corporatism, see, it has nothing to do with conservatism. Anything that smells of that corporatism that they've developed in the last 10 years or so, that is the stench that pervades around them. And see, is it left? Is it right? Is it a combination? Is it a shakedown operation? Is it a plantation? Is it PC, the new PC ism or isms? So yeah, they're proxies, and anybody acting that way who bought into that way, associated with that way, they all stink. And no, not even an iota of it is worth having around you. It operates at the detriment to any peoples that has any part of it around them. So henceforth, corporatist, proxyist, soundbitism, and substitutionism of political leadership is not acceptable at all. The people who represent your interests must be authentic and aligned with those interests and have no hesitations or doubts as far as their loyalties are concerned. Going forward, it's not acceptable. So if they come out with the jingoism, the marketeering-ism, the "oh, I'm for you"-ism, we're talking about a market study group-ism, we're spinning the message-ism kind of politics, that is dead as dead can be. That's that belongs to the time that we're throwing parentheses on. The PC kind of era that of total failure that we're leaving behind. Book money, right? Digital number. No real quantitative analysis on what wealth is. Having real estate holdings with funny numbers behind them and just dead cities and a bunch of people scrambling for a rent-seeking kind of class model that would never work anywhere, but really they're quite convinced that that model is the pan-ultimate new innovation. We're just talking about despotism and its stooges at this point. just some kind of crappier repackaged corporatist version. So any stink of that, that's going to get snapped like a twig, just like the other systems that supported these retrograde policies that these mush minds have foisted off as the next greatest and best thing, and don't question it, just keep on moving. There's a new circus on TV. Put on a cap and some kind of fandom. Get those cheerleading pom-poms out for this crew of abject failures. No, that's over. So just get with the new thing. Every day it gets easier, but it starts off hard, like real hard. I'm not gonna. You want to underestimate suffering, you can do so maybe at a later date, but if you're really suffering, even if you're a young person, you're so misguided right now. Okay, but you're going to have to get through it incrementally the best you can. And the best way to do that is to slow down in a safe kind of environment that allows you to live without you putting too many parameters for failure on what is just living. The world is peopling, and we're living incrementally like that. In every mind moment we imbue living. And it might mean mowing the lawn, if that's your kind of place, if it's what needs to be done. Then do that in a zazen way. You woke up this morning, it is not predetermined by anything. If you could die in the next 2 or 10 or 30 minutes, that's all the reason to cultivate yourself more now for the bardos to come. Infinite bardos, not just one. That's why people thought it was a boring concept. They made a hellish realm seem really cool and edgy, but that's not what they are at all. Boredom, how edgy is that? Whereas the heavenly realms, they have lots of different nuances which are heavenly. Do you hear the word itself? So be a good person, that's its appeal. It delivers. Bad things don't. I picked an apple, it was bad, I spit it out. I picked another apple, it was delicious. Perfectly ripe. Just a chance encounter. But that tree was planted hundreds of years ago. And so Gibo, the bounty of this living realm, can be yours with a moral, virtuous life and not in any other way. So if we did have religious figures that failed, then it doesn't mean that the religion is discredited, because that could be a PR strategy by people that don't share that religion, that might despise it. And if they can get away with it, why wouldn't they? That's what they've done. It's just been some kind of troll that people bought into or didn't do enough to reduce it. And yet at the same time, look, we're still living. There's people, they've been through multiple rounds of boxing. 12th round, 15, 16, 227 rounds. Keep still standing. Still punching and still dodging. Still moving those feet. Still moving that mind to a restful, one-pointed practice like a bowl that holds all the other things together. Try to eat rice in your hand versus in a bowl. That you give it shape with the practice, to refine the practice so that it is a more effective practice, so that it gets rid of the bad parts of your life or your psychology. Going from a natural state, but doing so compassionately and diligently with right view instead. despite the screams of maniacs that would say that that's somehow questionable. When it really is each individual's practitioner, what they get out of it or what they don't. And all of that has karma associated with it, does it not? You see, the theory doesn't stop where you think it should stop. And the practice doesn't stop where other people might think it should stop. It should be practiced for the sake of practicing, but the results are good if one is a good practitioner. Look at gardeners, see comedy routine. Have a competition. Who grows the best fruit without juicing and compromising ethics? Like, oh, look, we have a profitable system. Well, is that paper money or is that in real lived experiences, relationships, access to pollutant-free environments, or bodies that are very healthy and vigorous versus fat, slow, sickly ones? That is based on correspondent psychological sub-processes that nobody wants, but that's why we're plagued with them, and that's why we can also come up with a few innovative, out-of-the-box kinds of perspectives that anybody can follow at their own pace or skill level. But you do need right effort to get anywhere, don't you? But a lot of wrong effort will get you to wrong places. That's just the moral of the story. It's true in your case, and it's true in every human's case that's ever lived on this planet or ever will live. No matter what you think right now about how other people live, we do have commonality. Look at all the words we share together. Did you write or say the word "the" today, yes or no? How much of that "the" belongs to me or to you or to all of us? But what we put behind the determines karma in a certain way. And it can be for ill or it can be skillful. You can shoot the high mark of poetry, for example, or aim for it, or aim at it, and you can also hit it dead center at a far distance, straight through the black, into infinite nothingness. Whose silvery bow? Only whose silvery bow could ever even dream of accomplishing such a feat of magic? That every living creature can ascend, should they put in the right effort to do so. Thank you. Now, for those of you who have really struggled or are really struggling, I do recommend the absurdist lens. Even if it's just for one day. Just say, today I'm going to see things in an absurd way. Not because it's right view, but just because I can. And if you continue with right view, you'll be able to see funnier things without the self. And so there's no disdain for other people that are making mistakes. There's just observation and compassion. I think that's the part that scrubs any filth off of one and gives one a lemon-scented, a light citrusy note of pure clarity and ethical cleanliness, that one can joke around and one can make fun of oneself and others in a jovial way, in a right way, not in a vulgar, common, normal way, or even subnormal way. I really hate vulgarity of all kinds, including speech. I do. So you should hate it too, but not because I say so, because it has nothing to do with me. It's just a fact, a force of nature, a force of karma. That's it. As neutral as it can be, 0, comma, or 0.000 self in the game, just pure observation. And make the best decision for you, which is look at the absurdity of life, all of your seriousness. The world is not so serious as your seriousness. It just isn't. Your seriousness is your seriousness, and it's likely a kalesa if you're seeing things too seriously, when you could see them absurdly if you had that perspective that you can cultivate, at least for a limited amount of time. See, some people overdo it and can become heedless with it. Oh, I have to prove that everything else is funny except me. And then they play the bullying game, just like they do with every other wrong opinion. So it's a pest and epoxy on social conditions, or good feeling, or relaxed atmospheres if you can't joke at all. But again, bad jokes are just bad jokes. They're vulgar. A lot of them are stupid, disgusting, misinformed, conformist, dull, dry, misguided, perhaps filled with ill intent or ill will, sarcastic, corrosive, slimy kinds of points of view that one wants to pass off as comedy, but nobody else might find it funny. For right reason, not wrong reason. See, people that get offended, their wires are crossed. Actually, it's their offendedness that it should be offensive to them, and they should dismiss it. But no, rather they want to personalize and attach to ill will, essentially, and try to be the wittiest, when that is not really something just any old person can be, especially if one is just filled with kalesas and destructive, failure-oriented kinds of attitudinals that can lead to physical manifestations and other things, just in a karmic way. You don't have to see it any other way as one's own individual story or not. I liked, somebody said they laughed so hard when they heard that, yeah, you opened a can, now you're a can opener. But people, oh, you're a typist, right? You type with the typewriter. I mean, there are vulgar societies out there that base their knowledge on such vulgarities and act that way, so, and take themselves very serious. There's seriously worldly people. They feel above board. These are essentially, that is the snobbish classist. I have to be the best just because I have differentials that aren't apparent when one is in a place that would warrant really anything other than pleasant feelings for a fellow living creature, and nothing more than that. Just passing the time. See, I think people at this time have been so distorted that they forgot what being social means. But it's sort of just a friendly demeanor with no kind of Machiavellian plot behind it. Just generally well-meaning and forgiving, compassionate kind of person that isn't a complete idiot, or just take any old person at face value and their really important stories about something or other that made them decide to be first-rate pieces of crap in there. Really, because a lot of the failures, if you take radical personal responsibility for them, well, there's no further looking than in the mirror. Despite what the Khalees may present to you in the form of theories. That would be delusional, wouldn't it? Okay, well, anyway, let's just go from that general hypothesis that is utterly depersonalized, by the way, because I don't know your story, but I can relate to it via observation. So perhaps this is you, perhaps it isn't, perhaps it's just a part of you. See, sociability is just a passing conversation of perhaps not just useless information. See, it can be that too. You have to cultivate with who and what you talk about and when and why. And give those things some care, but at the same time not overdo it. It's not every conversation at a bus stop or at a sports arena or at some kind of public event is going to be top-notch or even remotely entertaining or insightful or perhaps wholesome. So the only foolish thing about foolish people is the expectation that that should be so. So why seek out something that the norm is, and norms change, can get worse or become toxic in some way. And that's it. There's really perhaps changing forms and conditions will lead to something else, and there'll be breakthroughs. Grass will grow through the parking lot, and 20 years later, nobody remembers it was a parking lot, kind of thing. I mean, it's pretty cool. It has advantages. It looks great. It's almost like kind of structural. It blocks the wind. It's almost like an apartment. And the floor, it's classic. But it's a rare taste. You have to get to that point. It's not a demand that you find that cool, because most people wouldn't. In fact, you might even think that would be cool to find that cool, but it really isn't. But changing forms and conditions, that's what the metaphor was about, not some kind of personalized, stylized kind of thing. It's not a gimmick, it's not a style, it's authentic creativity. There's a nice neutral word. You can wish all living creatures in the world creativity. How about the karmic directionality of that? Just the power of it, the sheer power of it, the radical power of it. To not just say that, but mean it too. How could that not have a good effect? Downstream effect. What do you think? Versus seeing under every bush some kind of thing you don't like. Becoming creative and finding dislikes and indulging the countless minutes about things like that. For what reason? Ask yourself that. Here's another thing that people, groups will try to do, is try to put you in some box, and then you could surprise them by not meeting some expectation they might have about some kind of caricature of person you should be, i.e. perfect, which is impossible. You have to let people be and become and experiment playfully. That's the formula, and there's no insults or decorums or things like that, except being an outstanding person at all times and looking to even outperform one's best principles. But those principles are very wisely chosen to not be over the middle path, and with an emphasis on spiritual and psychological health and development. I just, meine Damen und Herren, my ladies and gentlemen, You want to talk about a toned physique. That equivalent psychologically is the premise and the hypothesis and also the method. But it's not perfection. Dear brothers and sisters, don't demand perfection from yourself or others. So you can have a zany day, that getting back to absurdism, but limit it. Don't stay there. But return, and you'll see things differently through the same lens and non-committally, and it will really help you break these things up and make them digestible in such a cultivated way as humor. But not, like I said, the vulgar variety of it. Although it can have elements of that, but every day is improv. Is it not? Last Wednesday, I was covered in bruises and cuts. Very different Wednesday. This Wednesday, it's very special. It's just a little bit healthier. There's just one infected spot that's in treatment, but all things considered, you can be very grateful that it wasn't much worse. Different Wednesday, isn't it? So get to that Wednesday and then get to further Wednesdays that aren't as extreme as that, hopefully. Why can't we wish all living creatures well? So somebody wrote in, well, what does this have to do with the United States of America? Thank you very much. And look, I realize now I'm a relic of some bygone past where people were more social, more authentic, and really put in an effort to be friendly and professional at all times. And in fact, improving oneself over time also morally, which means, but also not necessarily going off into the immoral path at all. But at the same time, having some understanding for different people at different times that you didn't know them, and they could have died, 100 different times. And it's amazing that they're still alive. And you're not going to judge them on the basis of mishaps, misadventures, and any old other thing that one could have encountered in this very challenging dimension, by the way. Especially if you don't stay on the straight and narrow. And this is especially to the young people. Don't let them convince you that being anything other than a virtuous, upstanding, healthy person is cool in any way. And that also includes socially, that you can just be around different people and be very relaxed and non-judgmental, but at the same time, not get taken for a ride either. And that's sort of how they played us up until now. But games can end and people can change and they can grow and become more positive. We can reinvent Americanism to be friendly and professional and beneficial to the world again. Why not? Isn't that what that slogan means? Make America great again? What does that mean, if not that? So why not that? What's standing in your way? Ill will? The past? Do it differently, better, with less stress, if you can. But what kind of stress are you talking about? Creative stress? Like, I now am dealing with these types of paints that I never knew existed before because they weren't invented yet? With playful experimentation, but nobody calls that art. In fact, they just have disdain for metrics that do not apply to me, but they think they do because they know better me and mine and whatever, because of what again? Their personalities? Standing on their hands like that? How should they be definitive? if they are not. So read the classics. You're going to have to go back to curated things that might be much less in number, but the quality will be excellent, such as a few excellent things kind of way of living, and not getting yourself distracted or off in the weeds with any old thing, for any old reason, with any old person. Good friends exist, they deserve more time. Bad friends never did exist, really, other than to be parables. But those parables change over time. But yeah, being friendly to bad people, that's not the success strategy, is it? So you do have to differentiate, and you should take those things very seriously because they do matter. So be better today than you were yesterday, and better tomorrow, but you just have to take things one day at a time, with a little bit of humor, a little bit of Leichtigkeit. So picking up trash in your vicinity or in your neighborhood or in your heart and mind, that's just a daily activity that you can cultivate. It does yourself and your environment, immediate environment, so good. Looks better, it's fresh in some way. It's not trashed like your mind can be from time to time. So take these things matter seriously, but don't overdo them, and don't also become judgmental of others necessarily. But at the same time, there must be some critical thinking and some critical standards regarding one's company. And also a limit on it, like it limited to these areas for these reasons in this way and not differently. Not any type of committed forms that are unskillful, when it's all playful experimentation in the end, isn't it? And you really do wish all living creatures well, so what else is there in the form of ill will or delusional fabrications of third parties that don't know anything at all? Not themselves, others, anything but the Kalesis. But not even those, because they're not self-aware of them. They're not battling them. They are joining them. They are them. They're the definition. You open the book, you read about it, but then you see their picture, or you see your picture. If you're angry, right, deluded, adverse, or desiring, right? Thrown off the middle path. Well, that's where you are then, not the other person you were ready to castigate. And if one asks oneself at some point, why such a disaster? Then think to yourself, well, that's just the disaster of this day. This is just what needed to happen. This is the nature of the disaster at this right here, right now. Maybe you're just seeing it from a disastrous perspective. Can't you see the funny side? Think for a second how foolish others people are. If you weren't a perfectionist, would you be beating yourself up about trivialities, yes or no? So one is not surrounded by Da Vinci's. Well, Da Vinci himself was a bit of a prickly pear, as far as I know. Despite all of his just breathtaking talents, there were all different types of people that he had problems with for comical reasons, really, if you think about it. Yet I'm sure it did subtract from his life, but we don't get through this dimension without those kinds of interactions from time to time. And yet At later times, if you devote yourself, your entirety to skill, then you're not just any one thing or any person, but skill itself, or skill per se, at what one can attain at any given moment, which is quite fascinating. Today, I can only walk on one leg. So the comical nature of this day is not like yesterday, where one might have been in the realm of anger, which led to some strange occurrences, which has now led to the realm of regret and blame, but not of others, but of oneself. How could one be so foolish? But then again, stop yourself. There's no way of getting through this realm without foolishness. No way. It's impossible. It's like saying you can walk through the field without the grass. It's impossible. You were born into this dimension, and you will die in this dimension, or the body will die. Did you think of that for the last 7 seconds continuously, or with every breath? To free yourself from fanciful notions of disappointment or regret or sentimentality or distortion? Aren't those corrective contact lenses, especially when they've been put through the hygienic processes so that they are perfectly free of microorganisms or particles? Because you take meticulous care in those matters, but it doesn't go perfect all the time, and you're not going to let something wreck your day if you have to improvise. You're going to get through that day, that foolishness, the best you can. That's all you can do. But you can do it skillfully. And that's what you do instead, or as skillfully as you can at any given moment, given any given circumstances in a dimension of changing forms and conditions.